What's going on, folks? Smash that like button. I know I said I was going to bed, but I just realized I slept all night. So let's get right back to the business. Some shit went down in the last 24 hours that a lot of people are not talking about. I did tap into this a little bit this morning, but we're going to get into it a whole lot right now. I'm wide awake, and yeah, I fell asleep last night, but we did reach 1,000 subscribers. Shout out to the channel, man. Shout out to the channel. We growing. Now we pushing, obviously, to 2,000, but the ultimate goal that we pushing for is 5,000. 5,000 subscribers, y'all. So I don't have no time. I don't have no feelings that it's not going to be quite easy. We just did 1,014 days. And so now, let's get 2,000 in 30 days. I think that's easy to do. So double tap that screen when you come into the live, and we right back at you. Here we go. Matter of fact, let me wait till a couple of my moderators get in here. Once my mods get in here, we can move. Smash that like button. K-Cell, where you at? I know you still up. I told everybody I was going to bed, but y'all should have known I'm a workaholic. And so when it come down to it, we got to get the info out there. On this channel, we're not here to spread no falsehoods or no lies. So before we even put shit out there, we're going to fact check it. We're going to make sure it's right before we even do that. But let's get into this video.
Reported stories of the past 24 hours that every American needs to know about is that the sitting president of the United States had his bank account shut down, not for political reasons, but due to anti-money laundering related issues. Capital One confirmed for the first time ever in a court filing that the bank shut down many of Trump's financial accounts due to suspicious transactions that the accounts were engaging in. Not because he was a Republican, not because he is president of the United States, but under anti-money laundering guidelines, they could not keep the accounts open. And that is a major development for a president who now facing allegations in writing of possible money laundering related issues. And I have the latest, I have the court filing. Make sure to hit that subscribe button as we're on the road to 1 million subscribers. Like, comment, share, get the word out. And let's break it down, because right now there is a lawsuit pending in the Southern District of Florida, a court where I've practiced numerous times, Capital One against the revocable trust for Donald Trump. The trust actually sued Capital One. What happened was, back in 2021, after the January 6th insurrection, Capital One decided we're going to shut down a number of accounts associated with the President of the United States, also associated with the revocable trust. If you don't know how the Trump family structures their...
But I wonder why. What was the reason for that? Because of the January 6th insurrection? I'm lost.
Banking, well, they run everything through a trust. And the trust essentially holds all of the family's assets, all of the real estate holdings, the buildings, the companies, construction, everything they do runs through the DJT revocable trust, which ultimately pays out to the president, to his family, and then everyone around them. Well, Capital One said, there are some suspicious transactions. We're going to shut down these accounts. Trump cried out and said, no. You're debanking me. You're preventing me from using your financial institution because I'm a Republican, because I'm president of the United States, because I am MAGA. But the truth is coming out, and the truth is radically different. New court filing now shows on March 20th.
Oh, so they're not going to let you use that, Trump. They're not going to let you use you're being prejudiced against me because I'm MAGA.
2026, the court granted Capital One's motion to dismiss the First Amendment complaint, holding that the rules governing deposit accounts permitted closure by either party in their absolute discretion. As the court observed, in the end, limiting Capital One's discretion to close customer accounts because of allegations of impure motive would, quote, vary the express terms of the contract, which afforded both parties discretion to terminate their business relationship for any reason. We are not allowed to do. Accordingly, the court dismissed the First Amendment complaint in full, but granted plaintiffs a limited discovery period and leave to replead, providing clear instructions regarding the problems with the factual allegations and legal theory. Now, after more than 3 months of discovery, the Second Amendment complaint suffers from the same fundamental flaws as their prior two pleadings and should be dismissed. The Second Amendment complaint concedes that Capital One's decision to terminate the accounts was expressly permitted by the governing agreement and instead rests on vague allegations of political discrimination that are not supported by any of the documents attached to the complaint. To the contrary, those documents and plaintiffs' own allegations make clear that Capital One closed Trump's accounts for anti-money laundering reasons.
What y'all think? Do y'all think it was anti-money laundering reasons, or y'all think they were just fucking with Trump because it's Trump? That seems to be what a lot of y'all conservatives believe. In the chat, if you think they were just fucking with Trump to be doing it, type 1. If you think they was fucking with Trump because his ass is dirty, type 2. Let's go.
Closures were the result of months of analysis and a careful review by Capital's anti-money laundering team in accordance with bank policies and regulatory guidance. Capital One never publicized the termination decision nor its confidential internal process given rise to the closure, and it permitted Donald Trump several months and granted several extensions to find new banking services, which they did. As the complaint makes clear, plaintiffs Trump cannot meaningfully criticize the robust process undertaken by the anti-money laundering team, professionals with decades of law enforcement experience, in deciding to close the accounts. Instead, Trump's attempt to keep their misguided allegations of political discrimination alive by speculating that Capital One's anti-money laundering concerns were pretextual and claiming that plaintiffs were somehow misled by the contractually permitted closure decision. But these new theories are based on cherry-picked quotations unsupported by the full context of the documents they cite, and are, in any event, unnecessary for this court to consider. First, plaintiffs' claim for breach of the implied covenant cannot stand under Florida law because the rules expressly permitted Capital One to close the accounts for any reason and without notice, as which Trump cannot dispute. Their assertion that they can plead a breach of implied covenant by arguing that Capital One executed the anti-money laundering closures in bad faith is unsupported by applicable law. Second, Trump's argument that the account closures give rise to a fraudulent concealment claim fares no better. He cannot reasonably claim that Capital One, acting in accordance with the express provision in the rules allowing either party sole discretion to close an account for any reason, defrauded them. Under the terms of the agreement, they were not entitled for a reason for the closure. And finally, they're seeking an advisory opinion, which courts cannot do. But the big thing here, so that's the beginning of the pleading, and I want to talk about what that means. So there is this complaint, right, in the Southern District of Florida. Trump wants to sue Capital One and get a ton of...
Hey, Infinite, ultimately, that's what's going to happen, Infinite. This dude done opened up a can of worms that his ass cannot close back up. First the BBC, now this shit is it's going to be a fucking headache for him.
Money from Capital One for debanking him, for shutting down his financial accounts because he's a Republican, because of political reasons. But Capital One has, for a long time, kind of kept this private, as banks do. They don't give you reasons why they shut down your accounts. Most of the time, they just say, due to our internal policies, because when you open up a bank account, if you read the terms and conditions, banks can shut down your account for any reason at any time. That's their choice. They can shut down the account, give you your money back, and move on. Here, Capital One did that. They said, we're going to shut down your accounts. We're not going to give you a reason for it. We're just going to shut it down, and we're going to give you months and months and months. Go find a new bank, Trump. Go deal with someone else. We don't want to bank with you. Okay. Trump says they did that because of political reasons. Now, for the first time, they're revealing it's actually not for political reasons. It's because of money laundering related issues. In the United States, there are anti-money laundering provisions that every single financial institution has to abide by. And every single financial institution, especially the larger institutions, have anti-money laundering teams that specifically review financial transactions as they come in and out of the institution. And oftentimes, financial transactions will be marked as suspicious. It's called a SAR, a suspicious activity report. A SAR, and I've dealt with this numerous times as an attorney. A SAR comes in, you label a specific financial transaction suspicious. It could be done for criminal activity. It could be done as a part of money laundering scheme, whatever. Doesn't mean that it is criminal, by the way. It doesn't mean that it is illegal in any way. It just means that it is suspicious and the bank is going to take a closer look at it. And so in this case, they say that their anti-money laundering team reviewed the accounts, determined that the accounts likely violated specific anti-money laundering provisions that because of suspicious transactions that were coming in and out of the Trump accounts. And therefore they said, we're going to shut down the accounts. We're not going to let you bank with us anymore. That's not a political decision. That's a financial one. Because if you have to think about it from the bank's perspective. If Capital One were to allow money to be laundered through its financial institutions, and I'm not saying Trump laundered money, by the way. I'm just saying that there were suspicions behind violations of the anti-money laundering provisions, and that's a key distinction.
They seen some shit looking crazy, so they got on that shit.
But let's say from a macro perspective, that Capital One is caught allowing Trump to launder money through, or any billionaire to launder money through its financial institutions.
Hold up, my man Infinite says, legal at a credit card company doesn't care about your political ideology. They don't want to come within a country. They don't want to come within the country mile of anything that looks like money laundering. Hell no. Not no bank. Why the fuck would they? Y'all gotta excuse me. These fucking letters are small as shit on the screen. And I don't have no glasses on. I need my readers. But yeah, man, of course, why would a bank want to come anywhere near money laundering?
The federal government and the Department of Justice can not only then prosecute the person laundering the money and the company laundering the money, but can also prosecute the bank for knowing that the laundering is occurring and allowing it to continue happen.
Goddamn right.
The bank can also face significant...
It's called covering your ass.
...financial penalties in various regulatory bodies for allowing...
Also, y'all, can we get them likes up? I can't even see the likes on this platform right here, but I need to get them likes up, y'all. Let's get them likes up so we can keep the viewership up. We can keep the blood circulating in this live stream. That's all I ask. Just hit the like for me, please.
Financial accounts to operate in violation of these anti-money laundering provisions. And so from the bank's perspective, they have a ton of liability here. They could be sued up the wazoo. They could face millions, sometimes billions of dollars worth of penalties. They could face criminal prosecution themselves, the bank, as a co-conspirator potentially, even if there's a massive money laundering scheme occurring. And so what often happens in these cases, you will see the bank shut down accounts before we even get to the stage of, did
WTF over 2, my dog. What it do, man?
Trump engage in money laundering or not? We're not there yet. We're not even close to there. And odds are he didn't engage in money laundering. Odds are most accounts that are flagged for suspicious transactions, one-off transactions, two-off transactions, they're not engaging in money laundering most of the time. Most of the time, they're just innocuous one-offs, two-offs, whatever. And most of the time, they're not prosecuted. But the bank needs to cover its own ass here to prevent it getting financial penalties and from prosecution as well. But it hasn't stopped Republicans from pushing this debanking theory that they're getting debanked for whatever reason. It got to the point where literally Trump signed an executive order.
A breakthrough in Utah just unlocked an energy source the Department of Energy says could power...
Yeah, WT over 2, you was a member on my old channel. They shut that shit down. But I'm back.
...America for years to come. And there are currently 4 companies at the heart of this new energy discovery. We've...
Preventing debanking of conservatives, even though that's not necessarily happening.
President Trump's executive order guaranteeing fair banking for all Americans does just what it says. Look, for the last 15 years, since the Obama administration, your viewers might remember Operation Choke Point, when thousands of Americans, law-abiding Americans, were debanked. So at President Trump's direction, the SBA today has sent a letter to our network of 5,000 lenders across this country demanding that they stop debanking individuals and to document practices where they have done that, and if so, reinstated deserving borrowers and those seeking financial services. And unfortunately, this has disproportionately impacted conservatives. President Trump and his family were debanked. I was debanked, and it happened to thousands of Americans. We're going to get to the bottom of it, and we're going to end it.
Well, that's what they say. They're going to get to the bottom of it, and they're going to end it. Take a listen.
Talk a lot about the weaponization of the justice system, but we haven't talked as much about the weaponization of the financial system. One of the worst features of the last 4 years under Biden and Democrat rule, but of course it also precedes that too, is the use of banking and access to the financial system to enforce a regime of censorship and political control, right? Like something out of a communist country. We all know stories of people who had their platforms, their financial platforms, taken away from them simply because of how they thought or how they spoke or what their political beliefs were.
You said we need to enact postal banking nationwide? I heard that shit. Friend zone millionaire.
We've explored this and examined this as the White House. We found these practices are even more widespread than previously known. As you mentioned, they use this pretext of reputational risk as a basis for financial censorship, which is truly odious, truly un-American, truly dangerous to liberty in every sense. So we've worked closely with Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent on developing a financial enforcement mechanism to ensure that those who participate in the banking system are not debanking and financially deplatforming Americans as a result of their political beliefs. And we're hopefully going to have that product finished soon, and we'll be able to bring that to the president for signature. As he's identified, this is a top priority for him.
But now we're learning it's a top priority because they caught him engaging in possible money laundering. Subscribe, like, comment, share, get the word out. See you soon.
So this dude caught up in money laundering, possible money laundering. And y'all say he's winning?
Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche issued an order late last night that terminated President Trump's $1.776 so-called anti-weaponization fund, which could have compensated January 6th insurrectionists, among other people. Blanche's order also clarifies that the president's settlement with the IRS for tax audit immunity for Trump and his family members only applies to claims open at the time of the settlement and doesn't protect the president or his family from future tax filings. Republican Senators John Cornyn of Texas and Tom Tillis of North Carolina have both demanded that Blanche put in writing that the anti-weaponization fund was not moving forward, as well as clarify that Senator immunity for the weaponization fund, which could have compensated January 6th insurrectionists, among other people. That Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche issued an order late last night that terminated President Trump's $1.776 so-called anti-weaponization fund, which could have compensated January 6th insurrectionists, among other people. Blanche's order also clarifies that the president's settlement with the IRS for tax audit immunity for Trump and his family members only applies to claims open at the time of the settlement and doesn't protect the president or his family from future tax filings. Republican Senators John Cornyn of Texas and Tom Tillis of North Carolina have both demanded that Blanche put in writing that the anti-weaponization fund was not moving forward, as well as clarify that tax audit immunity before they would vote to advance his nomination for AG. That vote is set for tomorrow after being postponed last week because they hadn't figured out these very concerns. I want to bring in MS Now legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher. And Fallon, you and I thought that we would be doing more unpacking of why the administration wouldn't put this in writing when we know over at DOJ, lawyers love to put things in writing. It was the lack of clarity that was preventing them from moving forward. And yet, as I was reading this, it wasn't clear to me the way that they were handling the IRS tax audit piece. So if we could start there and break that down, because DOJ in this letter is pretty clear. The fund is dead. We're good on that front. So talk about both pieces of this and why, at least to my reading, the IRS thing felt a little bit nebulous.
Yeah, Allie, they definitely wove that in there kind of at the end, almost like a footnote, to the effect that I actually had to read it through a few times to make sure that I was actually reading it correctly. Granted, this was at 3:30 this morning before I actually had my coffee. But what I want to be clear about is that as far as the immunity agreement goes, I would say that it seems to clarify it rather than limit it. So that could create some problems because we know that both Cornyn and Tillis wanted that agreement to be limited. What it does is it lays out what we already knew, that this was retroactive only. It's not forward looking. But then what it does a little bit differently here is that it clarifies that it only affects the plaintiffs. Now, if you go back to the initial May 19th order that established the immunity deal, it says the plaintiffs, but then there are all these like related parties. There's trusts, associated individuals, all these things. So there's an argument that he is limiting. But what could create a problem here is that this order about the immunity deal isn't signed. You'll see there were two documents that he posted online overnight. The first one is a formal order rescinding the fund. He signs that. The second one it's more of a press release, it almost reads like. It says that it's an announcement about it. And so he doesn't sign that. That could create some problems down the road. But my read is that he appears to be clarifying, maybe limiting, but officially clarifying what already exists.
Yeah, and I think the ultimate question is the fund was just one piece of it, and certainly that's one of the things that Tillis and Cornyn together were focused on. But when I spoke with John Cornyn last week, he was really focused on the IRS immunity piece of it, in large part because he felt like it was the DOJ making a deal with someone who happens to be the president of the United States in a way that they would not make that same deal of future immunity in perpetuity for you and your family around the IRS and future audits. He felt that that was unfair. And I think now we're at the point of questioning, does this deal that is made right now actually serve as a deal that moves this nomination over the finish line? We haven't heard from Tillis. I saw a colleague of mine in the Hill press corps with a statement from a Cornyn spokesperson saying that they've reached an agreement and that they're going to be waiting to see what it is. Obviously, we got it late last night. So does this clear the runway now?
I mean, Allie, in theory, it should. I would have to believe that Blanche would not put out anything publicly like this if they didn't already have an agreement that they were going to move forward and actually confirm him. But there are still a number of outstanding questions here. If we go back just briefly to the actual part of the fund deal itself, that rescission, that's something that judges have been asking them to do since June, and they have not done it. But when I'm reading that text, what's notable is, of course, he signs it. He says they're not moving forward with it. He's been saying that for a while. This is a signed order that formally rescinds the fund. But my question is this forever? Is this just for now? Because it doesn't specify that. So while they're backing off of this fund right now, there is nothing, as far as I can tell, in this order that says that they can't revive this in the future. And so
if you find this coin, you can retire.
Most people think it's just belly fat until their liver shuts down and they die in silence. The most noticeable symptom of toxin buildup in the liver is a bulge in your belly, farting a lot, loading easily, and discomfort on the right side of your abdomen. You need to go on a liver cleansing cleanse right away, or your condition can easily deteriorate to fatty liver disease, then cirrhosis, then complete liver failure. That bloated gut, the sluggish mornings, the stiff joints, the mental fog, that ain't just age. It's your body drowning from years of toxic buildup, alcohol, bad fat, and too much sugar. Because junk food and booze don't just make a bigger belly, they overwhelm your liver, bloat your stomach with gas, clog your system with waste, and over time can contribute to serious liver problems. So how do you fix it? Well, not many people believe me when I tell them there's a natural detox that can flush out the years of toxic buildup in your liver. It's been used for thousands of years in ancient medicine. This ancient remedy is called milk thistle. You might have heard of milk thistle before, but people don't realize it's the most powerful liver detoxifier on the planet. It resets your liver, fights inflammation, flushes out built-up waste, and helps repair damaged liver cells. But here's the thing, milk thistle doesn't work alone. You need it combined with taurine for energy, turmeric for inflammation, dandelion root for digestion, and choline to keep everything moving. That's what actually cleans out your liver, shrinks the bloat, and brings your energy back. I've been recommending it for years to the guys who come to me at 40, 50 years old who feel exhausted, fed up, and frustrated. Just weeks later, they come back to me saying they feel like a completely different person. And the only change they made was taking Uvora Milk Thistle Detox every morning. After 7 days, your liver kicks into overdrive, and that bloated feeling starts to go away. Your body will begin flushing out years of accumulated sludge. Yes, you'll be on the toilet more, but that means it's working. By day 15, your pants fit looser and your brain fog clears. After 30 days, your energy shoots back to what it felt like in your 30s, and you'll wake up without hitting snooze. It's effective because it contains 80% pure silymarin, the active compound that detoxifies your liver and regenerates damaged liver cells. But it needs taurine for energy, dandelion root for digestion, and choline to keep waste moving out. Uvora Milk Thistle Detox combines all of these in one capsule. It's trusted by thousands of men over 40 who've spent decades drinking beer, eating fried food, and living on junk. Take one capsule a day, that's it. I've asked my team to activate the buy two, get one free offer in the bottom left corner. It's only available for the next 12 hours. Don't miss it.
When we're thinking about his confirmation, I'm also thinking about the outstanding legal challenges. There are multiple cases that are still challenging this fund. I don't know if this is going to be enough to moot those cases because it's not permanent forever. This is saying we're not moving forward with it now. So I would imagine as far as the Senate side goes, I don't have the reporting on this, but I would have to imagine that there's no way that Blanche would put this out publicly without the president's sign off, without those senators sign off with some sort of agreement that this will actually get his confirmation. Because of course he could have stayed on in an acting capacity for chunks of 210 days, depending on how they played this game. But this is a president who, you have to remember, brought this IRS lawsuit to secure the settlement agreement because he wanted some sort of judicial legitimacy around there. This is a president who cares about legitimacy with things like this. You would have to imagine that he wants an officially Senate confirmed attorney general.
Yeah, you would imagine that. And then also he has said during his first term that he doesn't mind people being acting because it does give him more leverage over them. And I just want to, when you talk about the lawsuits that were filed over that $1.776 billion fund, Blanche in the signed document that you're referencing says there have been several frivolous lawsuits filed challenging the fund, and at least one declines to say that this is moot. So he's trying to dead that issue. And I think it's going to be interesting to watch now once the sun comes up, or maybe we should just check Truth Social at the commercial break, what the president himself, who has really kept the idea of this fund alive, including in that clip we showed at the top of the show, he has really been the driver behind it. Blanche tried to dead this at multiple points, and Trump kept saying, well, this is popular for people in Trump world. So we're going to see what happens as it gets slightly later in the day. But I think to your analysis of this is probably right. If I put my Capitol Hill correspondent hat on, it seems like the exact kind of thing that Tillis and Cornyn were saying they needed as we went into the weekend. So I'll be watching very closely for how they themselves react. And the Senate comes back to town, in theory, to handle this business tomorrow. There is a lot, though, going on your beat. So I want to talk about this stunning reversal that happened over the weekend as well. The DOJ announced it's dropping felony charges against a former Olympian after acknowledging that damage to the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool was caused by flawed installation, not vandalism, like they've been saying, with no proof. The motion to dismiss was filed by D.C. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro on Friday after prosecutors concluded the damage attributed to former Olympian David Hearn stemmed from defects in the installation of the reflecting pool's liner. The filing stated that information obtained after the indictment showed the damage was caused by, quote, botched work performed by the project's contractor hired by the Trump administration. And it wasn't botched because of criminal conduct. The Trump administration has defended the $16 million no-bid contract by saying the work needed to get done by July 4th for the nation's 250th anniversary. Hearn had pleaded not guilty to a felony charge of destruction of property after authorities alleged he damaged the iconic reflecting pool during a June visit to the National Mall. In response, President Trump lashed out on social media, stating he disagreed, quote, 100% with Jeanine Pirro on the reflecting pool. I don't know what she was thinking. To me, it was a pure case of vandalism. Like, it's not vandalism, you can't prove it. Interior Secretary Doug Burgum echoed the president's message in a social media post of his own, writing, quote, the evidence is clear. Vandals have repeatedly caused damage to the reflecting pool. Neither Burgum nor Trump provided evidence for those claims. And ultimately, Fallon, isn't that it? That these guys can, in the court of public opinion, say whatever they want, but a DOJ lawyer or Jeanine Pirro can't go in and just lie in court.
Allie, we're hearing this directly from Jeanine Pirro's office herself, that there was no evidence here that Davy Hearn, that former Olympian, actually committed this damage on the reflecting pool. Now, what's really notable, there are a number of things here, is that we're hearing this after he's already been charged, after he entered his not guilty plea, and as this case was getting really close to trial. This trial was set to begin at the end of September. And so for Jeanine Pirro's office to move to dismiss this indictment, saying, hang on, we actually found out there is no evidence here. He didn't do this wrong. This is that no bid contractor's fault, not the Olympian, and presumably not the other people who have been charged. Now, Davy Hearn's the only one who is facing a felony count, but multiple other people were charged with misdemeanor damage here. But I cannot underscore how significant this is, that the DOJ is backing off of one of these indictments that you could make the argument is one of these perceived political indictments that wouldn't necessarily have been brought by other administrations. Jeanine Pirro here is now paying the price for backing off of this indictment. This is like a massive, massive turnaround, and just something we don't see, because this is someone who's had no issue bringing cases that the president wants in the past. This is the same person who tried to indict the so-called seditious six, those members of Congress, and a number of cases like this. Allie?
Yeah, I mean, I was on a podcast with Harry Litman and a few other former DOJ types, and they were all saying that this case, before it was reversed, was so embarrassing for the DOJ here in D.C. And I wonder now, I'll probably call them after this, how they see this reversal. Because you're right, it's absolutely stunning. And for someone like Pirro, who has made her career off of sticking closely to Trump, interesting to see what this does to her star in Trump world. MS Now legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher getting a lot of news on the board all before sunrise. Thank you.
Oh, let's get to the news, y'all. Let's get to the news. August 2nd, 2026. Sophie Cunningham. All right, who the fuck is she?
We need someone who can code in COBOL. See you later. Freedom.
Yo ho, let's go. Yes, dude, I saw that Trump won another golf tournament. And we're going to look at some shit that's funny, guys. Okay? Because he is now, Donald Trump has won multiple golf tournaments when at his home course on his events. And yet, every time he's done a tournament on an outside course, dude, he's literally come in like last place. So yes, we're gonna take a look at this totally true, absolutely like verified happening of this guy being, the top golfer. He's number one like Kai Trump is number one, right? Dude, remember when she did that fucking when she like bought her way onto that pro tournament, and she literally got last place by like 20 strokes. Oh, dude, let's just get right in, shall we? Shall we dig right in? We'll just dispatch with the pleasantries, and we're gonna get right in here with the nar. I want to start by looking at Kai Trump, right? Let's go back to her fucking, there it is. Her LPGA debut. 18-year-old Kai Trump shot a 13 over. Dude. Now again, guys, there's nothing wrong with shooting a 13 over. What there's wrong is you being a 13 over golfer that gets into a pro tournament because your daddy and your grandpa like leverage your way to get in there. So you go in there and you get last place. Like, dude, remember that? Oh my God, right? She officially became a Trump today. She got into something she didn't deserve to be in. She only secured it because of family, name, and money. And then she did worse than everybody else. Meanwhile, the people who got her into this tournament to get last place that she didn't deserve to be in, those people have been waging a nationwide campaign against DEI and people that are getting things they don't deserve. Oh, yo, Trumpy, what up? Yeah, no, I'm a little curious. I'm a little curious about your whole DEI wave. You know, the whole, oh, yeah, you didn't deserve that thing, but you got it anyway because, you know, DEI. And I'm wondering if any of that applies to your gnarly little granddaughter when you fucking juice her into these pro tournaments and she comes in last place because much like the rest of your family, she doesn't deserve to be there. Hello? Hello? Trumpy? Oh, I thought you hung up on me. Oh, you were looking for your little mushroom tip and you dropped the phone. Okay, that explains it. Yeah, just get yourself some baby oil and dig around in the folds down there. Maybe call in Melania or Kai to help you out, dude. It's in there somewhere. All right? It is. Dude, a couple people have seen it. It's pretty ugly, though. Brace yourself for when you find it, all right? All right, fuck you. Bye-bye. All right. Dude. All right, so he's going to be busy for the rest of the night, which is good because, you know, we won't have to see any of his tweets. He's going to be busy in the folds. Dude, let's go. Oh, dude, I am on one. All right? I am, guys, let me just tell you, I am on one. Bro, I have been, like, ravaging the internet, and we're gonna see some of that later. But all right, so yeah, let's look at the Trump golf tournament because this is something. Okay, this is something. Let me see what I saved here. Okay, all right. So I know where to find it. It is on my page. Actually, I retweeted it. Okay, so it was something that Kyle Kalinske tweeted earlier today. Dude, this shit is good. Okay, so here it is. So this is his 43rd club. His courses. Now, as you can see, look at the people packing it in. Oh my God. All right, so we're going to get into this. We're going to get into this, but I do want to start before we get into Trump's thing. Rigged, yeah, definitely. I do want to give you a brief show overview to let you know what we have today. All right, just to catch you up on the day. First off, the Mariners won, and what a crazy game. Okay, they were up 6-0 in the 7th inning, and dude, it should have been easy. They were killing the Twins. And then what happened in the 8th inning? In the 8th inning, the same pitcher who cost them Game 7 of the American League Championship Series, that same pitcher threw a 2-run homer and got the Twins back in the game. Then they called in a reliever who hit a 3-run homer. So then they went into the 9th inning, 1 run down. It was 6-5. Then in the top of the 9th, they tied it with a homer. So it was 6-6 after being 6-0 in the top of the 8th, bro. And then the Mariners walked it off. All right, so the Mariners won. In fact, guys, you know how I told you? You know how I told you that Jenny, when she makes omelets, the Mariners often win? Without me even asking her. After I told her the chaos and how it was 6-5 and that pitcher caved. Dude, Jenny made an omelet. She came in and made a 9th inning omelet to like save the Mariners. And it worked. Okay. So the Mariners won. That was for starters. Now, here's what we're looking at today. Okay. Today, we're going to cover this. Thank you to Jenny, dude. Let's get a round of applause for Jenny. Right? I don't smoke weed, boss. I've been sober 19 years.
Join the world's #1 RPG game. Download now.
All right. So, here's what we got. We're going to look at Trump and his dismal golf course record and just the pathetic loserism that is him. We are going to look at Andrew Tate because his lawyer was maybe issuing a veiled threat to Marco Rubio's kid, and or like, I don't know what's going on with them, but that's getting weird. Okay, that is getting weird on the heels of Rubio also being weird, because Rubio's basically saying, if you say anything bad about Israel, you can't come to America. Dude, that's getting bizarre. All right, then we are going to look, of course, at Sophie Cunningham, because they had their big protest in Minneapolis, and Cheryl Reeve, who we watched the video yesterday or the other day, Cheryl Reeve showed up with the nice Trans Kids Belong shirt, and they destroyed the fever. Sophie Cunningham was on the floor for 23 minutes, and she made one basket. They gutted them. And they had Riley Gaines. They flew in all the big guns for this thing. And you were at the game. Let's go. It was a disaster for them. Okay? They got their asses handed to them in every way, shape, and form. It was beautiful to watch. So we're going to look at that. And then we're going to look at the DSA. There's some polls came out about the DSA that are incredible. Okay? And so we're going to look at that. And then if we have time, we're going to look at Bill Maher. And dude, this is crazy. Yeah, man. The Minneapolis thing, guys, was like really special to me, as we'll see when we get into it. It was. That win was real special. And in fact, Caitlin Clark talked at the end too. Everybody's mad at her because she's not going to be, I think they thought Caitlin Clark was a bigot. But Caitlin Clark is not a bigot, man. She's not. Like, I think she's pretty woke, actually. So, yeah, we're going to look into all this shit. But we're going to start here with Trump's little golf tournament. All right? Yeah, dude. Dude, she is amazing, dude. Caitlin Clark, she's not going to be a Sophie Cunningham, man. She's not. Dude, Caitlin Clark is way better than that. But, dude, yeah, that game, crazy. Morgan Wallen, though, yeah, but dude, you can't really put all the stock in that shit. You know what I'm saying? Because, I love the fucking, the Seattle Mariners. And, if I got a chance to have one of the Seattle Mariners come hang out with me at an event, I would do it because I love the team, even though I know that person's politics most certainly suck.
President Trump made many comments, Brett, about the vandalism at the time. Watch.
These people went in and cut it up, and they got caught. We'll see what happens with them, but they got caught. Oh. But they put a big gash, 350 feet long. Think of that, 350-foot gash along the side. It's very expensive material.
Dude, that sounds about the size of Melania's gash, doesn't it?
And it was causing tremendous problems for your jobs. But now all of that is changing because I placed historic tariffs on foreign producers and manufacturers, including a 25% tariff on foreign automobiles, something that no other president had the courage to ever do.
Dude, he was yelling. Look at him.
He's a communist.
Oh,
he's a communist.
He's a communist. It always cracks me up, though, guys, when they start yelling USA, because it's like USA, USA. Because the guy's like screaming, "You're a pedophile protector," and then his crowd chants USA. It's like, we know ESA. That's the whole problem. That's why he's a pedophile and a pedophile protector.
And it was causing tremendous problems for your jobs. But now all of that is changed.
The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
You know, so it's like there is wiggle room in there. You know what I'm saying? There is wiggle room in there. You know. I mean, nobody's gonna be fucking perfect. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's gonna be perfect. I don't know. I don't hold people to perfect standards. I don't judge people when they want to, but we all choose like who and how we protest, you know? And I think that, you know, I give people the benefit of the doubt. I put it more on what they say, you know, like.
Hey everybody, it's Mark Kelly. I'm here with John Ossoff here in Georgia because this is the most important Senate race this election cycle in the entire country. This is a place where
Donald Trump just got the ultimate humiliation at the hands of his arch nemesis, Mark Elias. Mark, talk about the results that we just got as far as your law firm against the DOJ is concerned.
All right. So in the continued battles over state voter files, this is where the Department of Justice has sued 31 states, actually 30 states in the District of Columbia, to get access to their sensitive voter data. I think the last time we did an episode, the Department of Justice was 0-16 or 0-17. They are now 0-19. Okay, we defeated them in New Jersey, which, by the way, they thought New Jersey was going to be like they're in because they've drummed up these allegations about voter files. They lost in New Jersey, and then on top of that, they just lost in Illinois. So they are still searching for that first victory. My law firm and I, we remain undefeated.
To what extent does 19 consecutive victories impact the ability or the likelihood of any subsequent wins for the DOJ? Does that window shrink more and more every time that you notch another win in an analogous case?
Yeah, I mean, let's be clear. If we only look at the district courts, they're going 0-31. Okay, like there's not a federal judge out there who's like, you know what? I was kind of 50-50 on this. And then 19 other judges, including 11 appointed by Republican presidents, including 8 appointed by Donald Trump, they came out the other way. But you know what? I think they've got a point. So I don't think that they are in any danger of winning a trial court case. They are appealing these cases to the Court of Appeals. So they are already 0-1 in the Court of Appeals. They've lost the first case. We won the first case in the Sixth Circuit, which includes Michigan, which is where that case came from. So look, I think they are still searching for the first, Court of Appeals at this point, a panel who will agree with them. It's not looking good for them. And the other thing is, Brian, the clock is running. They've been trying to get these files now for a year. I mean, we've been litigating these cases going back to the middle of last year. And it's August 1st. We're going to hit a period called the quiet period, which begins 90 days before the election, which is very early September, where states can't do bulk removals of names from their voter rolls. So that is the reason why we're continuing to see DOJ, sort of flounder in these cases and try to get them up on appeal. It's also the reason why you've seen the executive order trying to turn the Postal Service into this. It's the reason why they are, hyping up the kinds of administrative errors that we saw in New Jersey, right? They're desperate to try to figure out a way out of this because this is the way Donald Trump thinks he wins the election. But so far, they aren't having any luck.
To that end, so far they're not having any luck. They have attempted this effort to try and squeeze the voter rolls out of 30 different states plus the District of Columbia. That's failing. Donald Trump has tried to pass the Save America Act. That's failing. That basically amounts to a federal takeover of state-run elections. You've got the Trump administration refusing to rule out the prospect of sending ICE to the polls. You have his executive order seeking to end mail-in ballots. That failed. So all of these efforts that he's put forward aren't working thus far. Are we at the point where it may be safe to say that we're in the clear as far as the 2026 midterms are concerned? Or is it even more dangerous because as Trump loses more, he gets more desperate, which means the swings he's going to take are bigger?
Yeah, it's the second, right? I mean, I wish I could say that we are out of the woods, but we're not. I mean, Donald Trump has a progression that he goes through, right? He starts with rhetoric. Then that rhetoric becomes more extreme. Then he goes to court. Then those court theories become more and more bizarre. And ultimately, at the end of that, what we typically see is him incite or instigate some type of violence. So obviously, the most analogous circumstance, 2020, we saw litigation before election, we saw litigation afterwards. I litigated those cases before, and I litigated the cases for President Biden and the DNC, winning more than 60 of them. And then, but as we saw those cases, they got more and more extreme. And then finally, when all those failed, we had January 6th. But Brian, you have reported extensively on this in other contexts. For example, you and I did episodes back last year when Donald Trump was deploying the National Guard and the military into LA.
Yeah.
Right. And at the time, it was like, wow, like LA does not need the military in LA. And what that was a prelude to what we then saw in Chicago. And when they lost those cases, then we saw what happened in Minneapolis. And that's when we started to see ICE and CPB and U.S. citizens being killed in the streets. And so you could replicate this over and over again across a number of different things. And I'm not here with a crystal ball to say what the end game looks like in 2026, what the next escalation is, or what the final escalation is. But I do know it's coming. And it's the reason why, my ask of everyone is really simple. Brian and I have done this series now, more than 500 episodes going back years. And we do this because it is a way to both keep you informed on what has happened in this case, 19 losses by the Department of Justice, my law firm and I, having a good run of success. But we also do it because it provides you the analysis, right? Because you can get that news, and you can get that news from Democracy.com, help you sign up for it. But it gives you the analysis. Brian and I are giving you the analysis of what to expect that comes next. And so do me a favor right now. And there is a button in front of you that says subscribe, and I want you to hit that. And then there's a bell. And if you hit that bell, what will happen is when we post new videos, you'll get like just a simple little pop-up alert on your phone. And it's really worth your time.
I should also note that, Mark mentioned that the DOJ is 0-19 in these cases where they're trying to get the voter rolls, which include private identifying information from all of these states, and get them sent over to the federal government, to the Trump administration. The bulwark against all of that is Mark and his team. Like, they are the ones in courts fighting on the front lines to protect all of our private information from getting sent over to the federal government so that they can use that information to suppress our votes. A small step that we can all take, a very small step we can all take to support that work, that invaluable work, is to subscribe to Democracy Docket. It is the single resource that I use to get all news on all things legal, voting rights, democracy. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're not yet signed up, please go ahead and sign up. Mark, to that end, I just spoke a little bit about what the administration is seeking to do with all of this information. But clearly, if they're willing to file 31 different lawsuits to get this information, it's valuable to them. So what is it that they're seeking to do once they have our private identifying information in these voter rolls?
Yeah, so essentially what they want to do is get all this information and put it in a national database. And once they have that, Brian, then they will run their own searches, their own queries, and they will determine who they don't believe should be eligible to vote. And this won't just be non-U.S. citizens. This won't just be people who are deceased. Let's be clear. They are going to use this as an opportunity to purge from the rolls, or to try to argue to states they have to purge from the rolls. People who are eligible voters are U.S. citizens, but they tend to be Democrats. And so by doing that, they will then go to the states and say, hey, you need to remove these 100,000 people. And the states will say, but those people are lawful voters. And DOJ will say, okay, but if you keep them on the rolls, we're going to criminally investigate you and maybe prosecute you.
Right.
And if you keep them on the rolls, we're going to cut off your funding for unrelated things. And if you keep them on the rolls, maybe we'll have our supporters dox you on social media. And so some number of state officials or local officials, whether they are election deniers and in the pocket of Donald Trump or afraid, they will remove those people. And if this sounds fanciful, a version of this is already going on, right? Like we've reported on this at Democracy Docket. You and I have done videos about the efforts already by this Department of Justice to use the SAVE database, which is essentially the DHS and Social Security Administration collaborating under Donald Trump's administration to try to do portions of this. So this is a real risk, and it's a risk not just for 2028, it's a risk for 2026, and it is something that we need to be prepared for and that we are fighting in court over.
And, you know, there are going to be people online who are watching this video who hear from Republicans or conservatives that the voter rolls need to be cleaned and that we have to clean the voter rolls. And so what would you say to those people? Give them the argument as far as ERIC is concerned. Explain what ERIC is and give the argument that folks watching right now could use when they're posed with this question.
Yeah, so I wrote about this in Democracy Docket. Brian, you and I did an episode on this, and maybe we could put a link to that episode in the description of this one. The states had an interstate compact. You know, didn't involve the federal government, was just an agreement among about half the states to share voter roll information and changes with one another through this central clearinghouse called ERIC. And what it did is it kept the voter rolls clean. And it meant that if someone moved from California to New York or New York to New Jersey, the databases of the states would communicate and remove the person from one place to another. If someone died in New York, but lived in New Jersey, the death records would get shared, right? So it was a way of making sure these voter rolls were in fact kept really, really clean. Well, what happened? Donald Trump and the Republican Party, when he was out of power, started telling the states, you got to get out of ERIC. And so a bunch of these Republican-controlled states, they left ERIC. They literally left the compact that was making sure the voter rolls were clean. And that is because they are not interested in clean voter rolls. They want the voter rolls to be a bit messy. That doesn't mean they're fraudulent, by the way. It just means they have names on them that need to be removed. The thing is, if someone dies in New Jersey and lives in New York, they're not going to vote. So, like, you want their names removed, but it's not a fraud thing. It's just a good housekeeping and administrative thing. But they want the rolls to be messy to create the pretense for Donald Trump to have the excuse to do what he wants to do.
And that right there is exactly the kind of analysis that you're going to get with Democracy Docket. Again, the link to the ERIC piece is going to be in the post description of this video, so please check it out when you get a chance. And make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket right after you read that. I'm also going to put a link to subscribe to this channel so you can see more episodes of Democracy Watch. Both of those are going to be right here on the screen. I'm Brian Taylor Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch. This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have a major rift that's erupted between Donald Trump and the Supreme Court over the most mind-numbing reason that you could have imagined. So I'm going to put a link to Donald Trump's Truth Social, one of his latest Truth Social screeds right here on the screen. He wrote, in part, the Supreme Court wouldn't even call out the rigged presidential election of 2020 because they said that I, as President of the United States, did not have standing to challenge it. And now, with time, it has conclusively proven to be stolen. And look what happened to our wonderful nation by allowing a grossly incompetent man, Sleepy Joe Biden, to be our president. This completely inept and embarrassing court was not what the Supreme Court of the United States was set up by our wonderful founders to be. So I want to talk about the first part of what I read, which was this idea that the Supreme Court didn't overturn the election in blind deference to Trump, and this new idea that somehow there is conclusive proof all of a sudden that the election was stolen. So can I have your reaction to that?
This man's not well. I mean, virtually nothing he said there or wrote there makes any sense. I mean, to say it's a lie really, gives lies a bad name, because it's hard to even call it a lie because it makes so little sense. So let's just start with the beginning, I guess, which is not even the beginning of the social media post, because this thing starts at a level 11 and goes up to 19.
It started like 700 words earlier, but I tried to glean the important part.
Correct. But Donald Trump did not win the election in 2020. He lost the election in 2020. And that is the conclusion of not one case in the Supreme Court, not, a handful of cases here and there. That's the conclusion of the states themselves. That is the conclusion of the 64 courts that heard these cases and rejected 63 of them. I was proud to be one of the leaders of the litigation effort that handed Donald Trump and his allies those defeats. That was also the conclusion, by the way, of Congress when they accepted the results. That was the findings of several recounts that took place, and governors that certified elections. So that's just a lie. The second part, that somehow the Supreme Court refused to overturn the election because Donald Trump didn't have standing as president. First of all, Donald Trump didn't seek to challenge the results as president. He sought to challenge the results as a candidate. A small point, but a point worth making. But it wasn't, the Supreme Court never said we were going to rule in your favor, except you don't have standing. I don't even know which case he is referring to as the one that he thinks he would have won but for standing. I mean, the petition filed directly in the U.S. Supreme Court, which I assume is what he's talking about, was actually filed by the state of Texas.
Yep. To invalidate the results in 4 other states, if I'm not mistaken. It was like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and was that the case? That okay? That's
the case. So like maybe Donald Trump's just like, well, that was mine because I put him up to it, which by the way is probably true. But so that's sort of the second thing here. But the third, which is just, the craziest of all, is that somehow he has been vindicated, that somehow since then we have now all come to the conclusion that he was wronged. That is not true. No one has come to the conclusion that he is wronged except him and his MAGA supporters. So sure, Donald Trump continues to say that he won the election, but he didn't. His faithful say that he won the election, but he didn't. His cabinet, who are all now wearing ill-fitting shoes because Donald Trump picks out the shoes that they are to wear, and then they have to wear them, even though they're clownishly large and don't fit them. They have to wear those shoes. So compared to telling a lie about 2020, the shoes are like a piece.
We provide espresso and coffee machines, accessories, and servicing across the United States.
The cake.
Yeah.
But everything he's saying is just a lie, and we all need to be insistent that it's a lie and call it out. And that's why, you need to make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because Brian and I, we bring to you this information about what Donald Trump is up to because it's indicative of what he's going to try to do in 2026.
And by the way, to that end, as you just mentioned, you were one of the leaders in these 64 cases that Donald Trump tried to bring forward to overturn the 2020 election. So for those looking to support the invaluable work that Mark is doing on the front lines in the courts where it matters most, a small step that everybody can take right now to support his work is to subscribe to Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting in elections. Again, a small step to not only elevate his voice in this ecosystem, but support his work as he continues to fight against Donald Trump's extrajudicial attempts to overturn our democracy. Mark, to that end, I'm reading Donald Trump's post here about the 2020 election, and I think on its face, it struck me as a little bizarre that he's going, taking all these steps to basically relitigate something that happened 6 years ago. But in fact, I don't necessarily think this is about 2020, although, his bruised ego is certainly enough to drive him most of the time. But we have seen so many instances of Trump trying to claim that the election was fraudulent. We heard him recently, like within the last few weeks, say that China had interfered in the 2020 election, that Iran had interfered in the 2020 election. So he brings this up on a near daily basis right now. This is happening at the same time Trump is trying to pass the SAVE Act in Congress. And so can you talk about why he might be so hell-bent on trying to prove or reprove right now that the 2020 election was stolen as a pretext to help him as we head toward 2026?
Yeah, Donald Trump knows he is unpopular. I mean, he can deny it. He can say that the polls are all fake. But look, the people around him, they know how to read a poll. And there's not just one poll that says Donald Trump's unpopular. Every poll says that Donald Trump is unpopular. And he can say gasoline prices are falling, but all anyone has to do is drive down the road and look at gasoline prices and see that they are rising. And the same with, other prices as well, and the economy. And obviously he has gotten us into the middle of a war in the Middle East that he doesn't seem to have much of a plan for. So Donald Trump knows that he is not right now set up in a strong position politically. And what that means is that Republicans are going to lose control of Congress this fall. Like it is, if the elections are held today, not only would Republicans lose control of the House, they would lose control of the House in a landslide. My guess is it would probably be a 30 to 40 seat Democratic majority. Okay, that tells you how unpopular right now Donald Trump and the Republicans are. I think if the election were held today, Democrats would take control of the Senate, okay? And that's a body that until recently nobody even thought was in play. So Donald Trump understands the political predicament he finds himself in, and he fears it. He fears that Democrats will take control of Congress, and that means that they will investigate him and his cronies for looting the government, for all of the corrupt business deals, for all the crazy actions they've taken with private companies, and also will hold them accountable for their official acts and for the way in which they rampage through American cities and terrorize U.S. citizens and the like. So Donald Trump doesn't want that, and he really, really fears that he's going to get impeached again. Because he finds that humiliating that he has already been impeached twice, and it would be, even more humiliating for him to be impeached yet again in his second term. So he's going to pull out all the stops to try to rig the 2026 election. It began with his efforts to rig the maps in Texas. Remember that? It wasn't that long ago, but that was his first plan. When that didn't succeed, he had the Department of Justice try to get access to the most sensitive voting information that states collect, individual information about all of you watching this. My law firm and I, we're fighting to keep your data safe in 30 states and the District of Columbia. So that was kind of his next thing. Then we saw the raids on Fulton County and the subpoena to Maricopa. That is not just about 2020. That's about a dry run for 2026 in case he needs to do that. He has said that Republicans need to take control of the voting. He has said that he believes the states act as his agents. Now, that's not true, but it is a window into his mindset. So when he posts this stuff about 2020, it is not just about 2020. It is about laying the groundwork to get his supporters ready to do what they need to do, whatever that is, to prevent Democrats from winning free and fair elections. That means trying to suppress the vote, trying to subvert the outcome. And as we saw after the 2020 election with January 6th, it could be even more.
So can you talk about the viability of the Save America Act as it works its way through Congress right now? Obviously, there are major implications for the filibuster, for the fact that this doesn't have the requisite 60 votes to pass, but that still isn't stopping Donald Trump from applying pressure. So can you talk about its viability right now?
Yeah. So look, the SAVE Act, or what it's now called the Save America Act, is not going to pass the Senate. It doesn't have 60 votes. It's not even clear how many votes it has above 50. I mean, Susan Collins was the 50th co-signer of it, and we haven't seen anyone else sign on since then. And there's strong reason to believe that you may not get Lisa Murkowski who's come out against it. You might not get a Mitch McConnell who has sort of come out against it. And you may not get Senator Curtis from Utah, right? So just to name a few, it may not be that, and that's before you get to Tom Tillis in North Carolina. So it may not be that they even have 50 votes, but they're not going to have 60 votes. So John Thune right now has his conference set to do a bunch of kabuki theater. They're going to, give fiery speeches on the Senate floor to the C-SPAN cameras. They'll send those clips out on social media. They'll make up false claims. They'll spread disinformation. But at the end of the day, Brian, it's not going to pass the Senate. And by the way, there are increasing rumors in Washington, D.C., that if they did pass it and sent it back to the House, because of course Donald Trump wants to add additional provisions like banning mail-in voting, it doesn't have the votes in the House. So I think Republicans in the House and Senate actually just want this bill to go away, but they can't let it go away because Donald Trump won't let them, and they are spineless. They are just doormats for him. So they're going to have to go through this theater, but in the end, it's not going to pass. But here's the thing. No one can then say the problem is solved because Donald Trump will issue a new executive order. Donald Trump will have his Department of Justice file new lawsuits. He may send federal paramilitary to disrupt elections. He may try to seize more ballots. Like we're at the beginning of this fight, not the end.
Mark, concurrent with that is this idea that the administration may be working to send members of the military or even law enforcement agents, ICE agents, to the polls. Now, you've spoken about the fact that the DNC has sued the Trump administration to try and get some visibility into this stuff through a FOIA request to compel them to release any ongoing plans that they have to send members of the military to the polls. Can you speak on that effort?
Yeah, so look, this is an important lawsuit filed by the Democratic National Committee to just ask the question, like, send us whatever information you have about, deploying the military or other federal law enforcement around the polls. Like, send us that information. Now, interestingly, the administration did not respond by saying there is no such information, right? They didn't say nothing to see here because there's nothing to see here. Instead, they refused to produce. So the DNC has sued to force the various agencies that they FOIA'd to provide this information. And look, if Republicans have a plan to seize ballots, or they have a plan to station the military around polls, or to have ICE disrupt, election day or whatever, like, the American people have a right to know that, right? I mean, this is your tax dollars, and you do not pay that money so that Donald Trump can misuse the powers of the presidency and misuse federal law enforcement to rig an election in favor of his party. So, look, this is an important lawsuit. It's one of a lot of lawsuits that are going on right now. It's one of the reasons, look, I started Democracy Docket in 2020 to keep everyone informed about all of this as litigation flies from one end of the country to the other and from north to south. Like, you're just going to have to be paying attention to everything happening in court. And so that's why I'm glad that Brian and I have this partnership. We do these videos and you subscribe here. Hopefully you subscribe to our newsletter, because this really is one of the best resources on really what is the most important political story of the year, which is Donald Trump's effort to subvert elections.
The snack wrap with Caesar sauce at McDonald's? Crispy, tangy greatness in one bite. Caesar sauce at McDonald's for a limited time. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
And finally, to that end, I want to finish off with this, because we've spoken about, Trump's insistence on lying, on trying to pressure the Supreme Court, on leaning on Congress to pass the SAVE Act, the White House working behind the scenes to deploy the military to polls. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. What do you tell people who see all of this stuff, happening, feel a sense of despair or hopelessness because there are so many, there's such a concerted, wide-ranging, and systemic effort by the hands of the Trump administration to undermine a free and fair election, who just don't have faith that we're going to be able to overcome these forces? What do you say to them to instill a bit of hope?
Look, Donald Trump wants you to give up. I mean, Donald Trump's best plan is that you read about all this and you think Donald Trump will get away with it.
Yeah.
Right. So don't give in to the cynics. Don't give in to the pessimists. Right. We describe these things for you, not to have you lose hope, but rather for you to gain perspective and take action. So look, Brian and I are regularly talking about what it is we can do. So you can start by right now calling your member of Senate. So you can start right now by calling your U.S. senators, right? They're debating the SAVE Act, whether they're Democrats or Republicans. No senator, will turn away constituents who have who call them. So register your approval for what Democrats are doing in fighting the SAVE Act, and tell Republicans you will remember at the polling place to hold them accountable if they vote for the SAVE Act. So that's something we can all do. Now, look, me and my law firm will be fighting in court. Brian and I, are trying to reach as many people as possible to spread this word. So the other thing I'd ask you to do is share this video, subscribe to this channel, share this video, leave a comment, like it, right? I mean, promote content from independent outlets that are helping keep you informed, and make sure that other people are informed as well. Because if we're all informed, we're going to beat Donald Trump. And we're going to beat them in court, and we're going to beat them in the court of public opinion, and we'll beat them at the ballot box. But all of us have to do our part. And so those are just some simple things you can do.
Perfect place to leave off. And again, that right there is exactly why Mark's voice needs to be elevated in this ecosystem. So if you are not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket, I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Please do yourself a favor. You will not regret it. It's a resource that I use on a daily basis. So go ahead and sign up. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch. This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have some major news here at the hands of you and your law firm against the Trump administration. A big victory in court. Can you explain what just happened?
Yeah, this is a blockbuster victory for anyone who cares about free and fair elections and keeping Donald Trump from trying to take control of those elections in 2026 and 2028. The Trump White House issued an executive order last year, signed by Donald Trump, in which he asserted authority over federal elections. Now, the specifics in this case, and the ruling that we just got, had to do with proof of citizenship. We all know that that's been like one of the big ways that Republicans have been trying to figure out how to suppress voting rights, because it affects married women who change their last name. It affects people who are younger, who may not have their original birth certificate, right? But the implications of this cannot be overstated. This is a blockbuster ruling because what the federal judge said, and I quote, is, put simply, our Constitution does not allow the president to impose unilateral changes to federal election procedures. She also said that the Constitution, quote, assigned no role at all to the president when it came to election rules. So if you are worried, as I am, and I know Brian is, about the president saying he's going to ban mail-in voting, he's going to, he's going to seize voting equipment, he's going to insist that he can count ballots. This is a federal judge saying, under constitutional separation of powers principles, that the president has no role at all in federal elections.
Can you talk about the appeals process and whether you think that it's the Trump administration's ultimate goal to get this thing up in front of the Supreme Court?
Look, Brian, there's no question that the administration didn't pass this rule to have it set aside by a federal district court judge. They're going to run this up through the appellate process. The next stop will be the D.C. Circuit, where that the case will be heard. But I have no doubt that the Supreme Court is their ultimate goal, because they want this to apply. They want this to apply nationwide. They want to establish a precedent that is binding on all courts, not just in Washington, D.C., that the president is virtually a king, that he can decide, who gets to register, who doesn't get to register, what documents they have to provide. And ultimately, remember, and I'm going to put on the screen right here, what Donald Trump posted on social media a few months ago, that he believes the states act as his agents in counting and tabulating ballots. And that's what everything we are seeing right now is all about. That's what this executive order, was only about voter registration, but it's ultimately about establishing the power. What was the seizure in Georgia about? It was about ballots, right? And so we need to take this seriously. And for at least for today, the good guys won, and I'm proud to have been lead counsel in that effort.
All right, well, that's the perfect opportunity right now for folks who are watching. If you'd like to support Mark's work, a small step that we can all take is just subscribing to Democracy Docket. That's the news outlet he founded to focus on everything voting and elections. So that will give you the opportunity to get all of this news as it breaks from a primary source, the person who's actually filing these lawsuits, and to support his work in the courts where it matters most. And he has 80 court cases being litigated right now, including 24 of them where the only thing standing between your voter data being turned over to the Trump administration or being left to the states is Mark and his team. So again, if you want to show some support for the work that they're doing and the cases that they're winning, the best way to do that is to subscribe to Democracy Docket. I'm going to put those links right here on the screen and also in the post description. Mark, it's worth asking here, is there anything we can read from the tea leaves that might suggest how something like this would perform at the Supreme Court? Like, has the Supreme Court given any indication one way or the other how they feel about this case if and when it's inevitably appealed up to them?
So I think that there are mixed signals here, or tea leaves that go in both directions. So on the one hand, they have unquestionably taken a position that the president has a lot of power, right? They have adopted a very strong presidential power model, one that is not frankly supported by the original understanding of the founders, but nevertheless, it's the one that this Supreme Court has adopted, which is the reason why Donald Trump keeps winning cases that you would think he should be losing. On the other hand, if you are a textualist or an originalist, which most conservative justices say they are both, it is hard to get around the fact that the Constitution gives the states, not the president, the power to set the time, place, and manner of elections. And that it explicitly says that Congress can overrule the decisions of the states. So the plain text of the Constitution says states set the time, place, and manner of elections, subject only to override by Congress. Left out of that entire equation is the president.
Yeah.
So I think that the Supreme Court is going to be between these two notions. One, that the president needs to be very powerful and, should be able to do a whole lot of things that the Constitution doesn't seem to say. And on the other hand, they have this textually committed right to the states and to Congress, and also the history and tradition that no prior president has done this. I mean, Brian, I think sometimes we lose sight when we talk about these court cases about just how absolutely extraordinary it is that the president of the United States would even assert this authority, that the president of the United States would have his Department of Justice, for example, try to go get voter files from the states. I mean, this is just like not something that prior presidents thought they had the constitutional authority to do, or that they had the inclination to do, because the only reason why the president would want to be able to decide that he can unilaterally impose additional restrictions on who can register to vote or who can get an absentee ballot or whose ballot counts, the only reason why he'd want to do that is because he wants to affect the outcome of the midterms, or maybe not just the midterms, but also in 2028.
Right.
And the thing is, Donald Trump is telling us that that's what he wants to do. He recently said, and maybe we could put this up on the screen, he doesn't think there should be midterm elections. Now, Carolyn Levitt said it was a joke, but does anyone looking at that text see a joke? It's not a joke. This is what Donald Trump wants to do, and the courts dealt him a huge setback in this case. And this is one to watch, and it's one that I'm very proud of.
In terms of the Supreme Court getting their hands on this thing, and I know that you said that they're stuck between, their deference to Trump and this expansive executive authority and the plain text of the Constitution. My concern here is I think what a lot of people's concern is, which is Constitution be damned, text be damned. The Supreme Court's just going to do whatever they want expressly because they're ideologically aligned with Trump and because there's no higher power than them. And so if they want to just make something up out of whole cloth, they can. There's nobody to tell them no, and they've got the majority. And so can you offer some pushback to that? Because, I know that your position is that the arguments that are made to the courts still matter. And I'm wondering if you share my same concern that a lot of this stuff is preordained to just give Trump whatever he wants anyway.
Yeah. So when it comes to the Supreme Court, I describe myself as a Supreme Court skeptic, but not a fatalist. So it's not that I think the Supreme Court doesn't have a bias that towards Donald Trump or towards conservatives or towards Republicans, whatever it is. I think it has that bias, and I think that it is that every time that me or someone in my position, appears before the Supreme Court, as I did in December, or, has cases before the Supreme Court, I have a voting case, that it actually just came out. It's going to be heard on March 23rd. It's the Watson case for people following that at home, big voting case involving mail-in voting. It's not I think we're starting with a totally neutral, balanced set of justices. On the other hand, I'm not a fatalist. I don't think that the arguments don't matter. I don't think that we automatically lose. I mean, the fact is, I can point you to examples where we have won, where my law firm has won, where in cases we've not been involved in, we've gotten good pro-democracy decisions. So I think that it is not a great situation, but it is not a fixed situation. I know that there will be people who disagree with me. There are lots of people who push back on me and say, Mark, it is in the bag, and it is all sort of predetermined. But I ask them to then answer the question of why is it then that we can point to these cases where, in fact, the Supreme Court has ruled against Trump.
Right, and that's the perfect point here, and I think that degree of, I don't even want to say optimism, but pragmatism. I mean, the reality of the situation is going to be important for folks like me who often would describe themselves as Supreme Court fatalists. So I think it's important to have like that, that sense that even in a world where everything does feel like the scales are tipped against us, that the whole thing is not just fixed.
And the other thing is, Brian, I would just say to people who are not persuaded by my argument and see themselves more in the same vein that you are. I make another argument, though, to you not to go down that road, which is that if you go too far down that road, you actually give the Supreme Court a permission structure to act that way. Like, one of the things I felt very strongly about when in the Supreme Court argument that I made is, look, I'm not dumb. I know the Supreme Court took this case because, they probably want to strike down this campaign finance law that's been on the books for 60 years. But by showing up and making the argument, I don't give into the cynicism and the permission structure for them to just say, okay, even the proponents of this law, the supporters of this law, think it's all right. Everything is lost. And so, in a weird way, Brian, we give power to Donald Trump that we don't want him to have by saying that he can't lose. Like, we want him to know that he can lose. Yeah. And I worry sometimes that by being fatalistic, we actually encourage, in a way, the Supreme Court or Donald Trump to feel like there's no check on their power.
Yeah, well, look, no one can say with more authority that they are serving as a check on Trump's power than you and your team. Again, this case that you've just won is a testament to exactly that. And I know that this is not the only one. Again, you have 80 cases happening as we speak. So again, a small step that everybody can take to support Mark's work and elevate his voice, which could not be more important than it is right now, is to sign up for Democracy Docket. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.
Honey, did you invite the minions over?
Well, you know how we talked about getting Wi-Fi from Xfinity?
Yeah.
I ordered it this morning, was online in minutes, then they showed up.
So they just came over to use the Wi-Fi? For what?
Better not to know.
Get online in minutes with same-day Wi-Fi from Xfinity. Plus, lock in your price for 5 years and see Minions and Monsters only in theaters. Xfinity. Imagine that. Restrictions apply. Not available in all areas. Learn more at xfinity.com/same-day Wi-Fi.
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have major news from the U.S. Supreme Court thanks to you and your law firm. Can you explain what that news is?
Yeah, the U.S. Supreme Court rejected the effort by Republicans to overturn the congressional redistricting map in California. So this is a big victory for the people of California, a big victory for Gavin Newsom, and a big victory for democracy, because this means that map will be in place. There are no more illegal challenges, no more ways for Republicans to try to screw this up. That will be the map in place for the 2026 elections.
Was there anything surprising or unorthodox about the decision from the Supreme Court?
There really wasn't. The Supreme Court rejected it. There were no noted dissents. And so if there was anything that was surprising, although it would have been kind of surprising or noteworthy either way, is that there was no one who sided with the Republicans. For all of their big talk, for all of the Department of Justice's big talk, because remember, they brought this case also, they wound up going 0 for 9 in this Supreme Court.
Why do you presume that was? That even when we have a Supreme Court that is so quick to defer to Donald Trump, and especially when you have people like Samuel Alito or Clarence Thomas who just kind of throw everything to the wind if it means they can heap more advantage, more benefit, more deference to Donald Trump. Why do you think it is that even those people decided that this case was not going to be it for them?
Yeah, look, I think that the Supreme Court made a decision in the Texas case that it was simply not going to halt any of these new legislative efforts before the 2026 midterm elections. And it was not going to halt them where they were clearly drawn for partisan reasons. We had won a case at the trial court in Texas, thought we were on the right side of that, thought we had the better argument, still think I do. But the Supreme Court said, nope, we're going to let the Texas map go into place because it's a partisan gerrymandering, notwithstanding the fact that we pointed to evidence that it was race-based. And in that decision, they actually pointed to California as also partisan. So by the time the case actually got from California to the Supreme Court, they had kind of locked themselves in because they were trying to run interference on the Texas map. And I think that's just kind of like where we are. Right now, we have, partisan gerrymandering going on in a number of states, and the Supreme Court's just going to take hands off. But, Brian, I think the larger news in all of this is that with the recent election results, that victory in California is much more valuable than the victory in Texas, right? Because the victory in California really is 5 seats. It is 5 seats, put it in ink in the book. And the 5 seats in Texas, well, there's a lot of puckering going on now in the state of Texas after the recent special election. So, we may wind up in that back and forth exchange just there, actually netting Democratic seats, which is not where people thought we'd be. Certainly not where Donald Trump thought we'd be. And that probably explains why he has become incredibly erratic in the last few days, even more erratic than normal and more panicked than normal.
And I want to talk about the implications of this latest Texas Senate District 9. What implications do you think that's going to have on the broader electorate, especially in light of the fact that they've stretched these districts even thinner? But first, I just want to give a quick note to folks who are watching right now. Mark and his team are the ones who litigated this case in California, just like they're the ones who litigated all of these voting rights cases, these gerrymandering cases across the country, just like they're the ones who are litigating right now 24 different cases in 24 different states in Washington, D.C. to protect everybody's voter data from going to the federal government. And that includes information like your social security number, whether you're a registered Democrat or Republican. They are the only ones standing between the government getting that data and it staying at the state level where it belongs. So a small step that we can all take to support the work that he and his team are doing in the courts on the front lines is to sign up for Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting elections. I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. So if you've not yet signed up, please show some support for Mark and his team and sign up. So Mark, again, to that earlier question, the implications of the gerrymander given the swings that we're seeing in the off-year elections.
Yeah, I mean, if I had told you last June that we'd be sitting here now, thanks to the legal work that lawyers like me and my team have done, and thanks to the tremendous political leadership by people like Gavin Newsom in California and elsewhere, if I had told you that we were going to be sitting here talking about Democrats netting seats, that's the reality, though. I mean, this Texas, this Texas outcome was a 31-point swing. Let's just assume it's half that. Let's just assume it's a 16-point swing. Hell, let's assume it's half of that and it's just an 8-point swing. You're talking about a number of those seats that they thought they were gaining actually becoming Democratic seats, and the kicker, some of the seats that they drew voters from in order to create those seats also being at a risk to create Democratic. I'm not ready to call it yet, but I think it is fair to say that net, by the time we get to Election Day, this whole thing may wound up have backfired on Donald Trump and been a major disaster of his administration that led to Democrats retaking control of the House.
And again, I want to just highlight that would not have happened if it does indeed play out that way without the work that you and your team are doing in all of these cases across the country. So to that end, what can you tell us about the landscape of these other ongoing lawsuits? I know that we're looking at lawsuits that are right now in process in Wisconsin. What's the lay of the land in terms of the ongoing legal cases?
Yeah, so let's just do some basic math here and you'll see why I wind up where I do. You got 5 seats in California. I think at this point, Republicans would be happy to take 4 in Texas. So that nets Democrats 1 just on that swap. Then you add to that Utah, New York, right? That puts Democrats up 3. Against that, you got North Carolina and Missouri. So Democrats still net 1. Now, what's left on the table is Virginia, where Democrats just released a map that would gain 4 seats in Virginia. You've got Maryland still potentially in play. You've got Wisconsin still potentially in play. And on the other side, all they've got really is Florida. And Florida is probably 3 seats. So even there, they wind up netting down one just versus Virginia, and that's before you get to those other states. So I think there is a very compelling argument that right now, if everything froze as it is, and look, nothing ever freezes as it is in this area of the law. There's always new cases being filed. There's always new decisions. There's always the next fight. And we're, as you point out, my law firm is in the middle of it, and Democracy Docket is covering it every step of the way, as you are, which is why everyone needs to make sure to subscribe to this channel, because Brian and I cover this in almost real time, like no one else's business. So make sure you're subscribed to this channel. But if you take all of that out, Brian, you wind up with Democrats netting 2 seats after all of that. Now, the big wild card is whether the Supreme Court decides the Calais case between now and the next few weeks, where Republicans could try to take advantage of that. But every day that goes by, that looks less and less likely.
So for that Calais case, because you and I have spoken about this for months and months and months now, having warned everybody about what it would mean if Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is struck down, and that's the only thing really keeping in place a mandate for these states to enact these minority-majority districts. So all these black opportunity districts, those go away if the no longer protected or mandated by Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. So I guess, look, we kind of, every day is gravy at this point that we don't hear anything from the Supreme Court. But at what date would you feel comfortable recognizing that it's almost an inevitability that the Supreme Court is going to hand down this decision? At what date do you feel comfortable that it at least wouldn't apply to the 2026 midterms?
I think by the time we get to June, it's too late for it to apply anywhere.
Okay.
I think between now and June, it's already too late some places, right? I mean, like it's already too late in Texas, for example,
right,
which has very early elections. But there's going to be a calendar that we march through. By the time we get to the beginning of June, it is simply too late everywhere.
Okay. I mean, that's at least some good news, because like I said, like we're going to, every day that we don't hear from the Supreme Court brings us one day closer to taking one more state off that list. But Mark, it's worth asking here, are there certain days that the Supreme Court is going to be dropping cases, or any week of any month they could just decide to drop a decision?
So the Supreme Court really just turns these decisions out as the 9 justices have their opinions written. So, towards the end, they will put together a schedule that says these are the opinion days. Now they more or less add them as they go along.
Okay, understood. Now, what other states, aside from this Calais case, might we expect to go to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, so look, the Republicans in Utah, they're fighting mad. I mean, they're packing their state Supreme Court. They're so angry. But a petition has been filed, or a lawsuit has been filed in Utah by some Republican candidates. And they say that they think that this map violates federal law. And it is clear they are going to try to fast track that to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, they have to go through a 3-judge panel first, but all indications are going to try to run that case quickly. And, the Republicans in New York, they keep making noise that somehow they're going to try to get that case to the Supreme Court. I mean, good luck to them there. That case still has to go through the New York court system, and it's on state law. So I don't even see what theory they'd have to get the federal court. But it goes to show you, Brian, that they are desperate right now. They are losing right now. And anyone who thinks that like Donald Trump is playing offense now around the elections, it is because he is dealing from a position of weakness. The fact that every day, he finds another opportunity to say that he may try to steal the election is an indictment of just how badly this whole redistricting process went. Because this was going to be his gambit for how he prevented losing the House. And it has backfired from start to finish. And that is the big news.
And I want to dig in a little bit to this Utah situation, because we just found out that Spencer Cox, the governor of Utah, the Republican governor, has decided to pack the Utah Supreme Court. And I believe it's largely predicated on this issue, on this idea that the existing Supreme Court allowed this map to kind of revert back to this map where Democrats would have one seat, I guess the Salt Lake City area, that they would control. And so is that going to be relitigated once the Supreme Court is actually packed, or at least for the 2026 election, is the map solid, firm, in place?
I think the map is solid in place as a matter of the state court system. Like I said, their Hail Mary there is trying to go a quick case up through the federal system and trying to get that to the Supreme Court. I think that's a real long shot for 2026 just on the timing. Forget about the fact that I think they're not right on the merits. But, look, here's the thing, Brian. the Republicans think the Supreme Court of the United States is the solution to all their problems.
Right.
And, you know, like, look, that's not a terrible operating theory from their standpoint.
Yeah.
But it is not proving to be true in a lot of these voting and redistricting cases. I mean, you know, we often talk about the cases I've argued for the Supreme Court, and I've argued for that have been decided, and all of them I won, and they were all redistricting cases. I mean, Republicans have a history of losing critical voting and redistricting cases in the Supreme Court. Doesn't mean they always lose or even most of the time lose, but it is less predictable for them, but it is still where they're putting all their eggs in that basket.
I mean, in theory, if the Supreme Court wasn't willing to touch California, which is the big prize because of the precedent, how it would screw with the precedent that they just tried to set in Texas, where they're saying we're going to take a laissez-faire approach, we're going to take a hands-off approach. In theory, that would also kind of lend itself to reason that they wouldn't, you know, interfere in what's happening in Utah for that exact same reason.
I think that's right. I think that's true in Utah. I think it's true in New York. I think that they, like I said, have decided that they are hands off for the 2026 cycle. And honestly, they're putting all their energy in Calais, right? I mean, the idea that the Supreme Court might overturn the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, which has been on the books since 1965 and has been used, you know, in dozens of cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, hundreds, if not thousands of cases at lower courts. And that is potentially on the table. I mean, that's a big piece of business that they have in front of them. I don't think they necessarily want to complicate this by adding in a one-off in a Utah or in a New York or someplace else.
Well, look, I'm going to say it one more time. There are very few people who are actually on the front lines fighting, making a huge difference. You and your team are. And so a small step that everybody who's watching right now can take to support Mark's work is to sign up for Democracy Docket. Again, a very small step that we can all take for the fact that he is litigating more than 80 cases across the country right now and just protected these 5 seats in California. So there is no one making a bigger difference right now in democracy than Mark. And so a small step, again, that we should be taking. Sign up for Democracy Docket. That link is right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.
For 250 years, America has stood on grit, sacrifice, and stubborn belief. Small business owners have carried that spirit in every generation. I have lived it.
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have some major news here. You and I have spoken at length about the voter rolls, the fact that the federal government, Trump's administration, is trying to gain access to the voter rolls, which includes information like social security numbers, for example. You're litigating this in 23 different states plus Washington, D.C. We now have a major update in court at the hands of a federal judge that might throw a wrench in the entirety of Trump's plans. Can you explain what just happened in court?
Yeah, this is a blockbuster ruling out of a federal district court in Oregon. You know, as you point out, these lawsuits have been filed all throughout the country in 24 states, including Washington, D.C. My law firm and I, we are fighting them in all of those jurisdictions. And one of those cases was filed in Oregon. And boy, did Donald Trump's DOJ pick the wrong federal judge to wind up in front of. Because this judge didn't just rule against the Department of Justice. He hauled everyone into a special hearing about how the Minnesota letter, remember this, the letter that Pam Bondi sent to the governor of Minnesota on the day of the tragic shooting of Alex Preddy to try to leverage that shooting to gain access to Minnesota's voter file. Well, the judge, found out about this and was so incensed he wanted a hearing, he wanted a briefing on it, and now he has issued his ruling. And he cites that letter in really an earth-shattering decision that says, quote, the presumption of regularity that has been previously extended to the plaintiff that it could be taken at its word with little doubt about its intentions and stated purpose no longer holds. When plaintiff in this case conveys assurances that any private and sensitive data will remain private and used only for a declared and limited purpose, it must be thoroughly scrutinized and squared with its open and public statements to the contrary. What that means is that the presumption of regularity, which is the biggest weapon that the Department of Justice have in almost every case. This means when they walk into federal courthouses, judges assume that if you are from the Department of Justice, you are on the up and up, and what you tell them is true, and if you tell them you have good reason for something, you do. This federal judge is saying that presumption's gone, that the Department of Justice can no longer be taken at its word, that it can no longer assume that in these cases, that when it says it wants these data for legitimate reasons, that in fact it wants them for legitimate rather than illegitimate reasons. And though this is only the decision of one federal judge in Oregon, this has the potential to blow open these cases around the country. And Brian, even more than that, maybe this courage by this judge, this realistic, no rose-colored glasses view by this judge will actually affect the way federal judges in other kinds of cases where the Department of Justice is relying on judges to take them at their word will affect those judges as well.
And that's exactly the point I want to dig into here, because you and I have spoken for months and months and months about the presumption of regularity, this idea that these judges will automatically confer goodwill onto the Department of Justice because the federal government, one would assume, after decades of them acting in good faith in court, that when they come into court, they're telling the truth. And kind of watching everything happen at the hands of this DOJ and this administration, watching the extent to which they will lie with abandon, and wondering when we will get to a point where judges no longer offer them that goodwill. And so my question here is about the impact that this will have on other judges. Like, does there come a point where, there is kind of a global acceptance that the presumption of regularity should no longer be given to this DOJ? Is it the kind of thing where it's truly just one courtroom, one judge in one courtroom makes this decision and it has no bearing whatsoever on other judges? How does it work? And could we get to a point where all judges kind of do agree that presumption of regularity should no longer be given to the DOJ?
Look, I think the way these things happen, the way the law develops, the way legal theories develop, and the way in which courts view issues is by one judge going first and then others following. Uh-huh. And so the reason why this is such a big deal is because, as you say, there are 24 cases that deal with this basic same issue. And the fact that one of the first judges to rule in these cases found that the presumption of regularity has been rebutted and should no longer be in effect means that other judges considering these same kinds of cases will read that opinion and say, well, you know what? He made some sense there, and maybe I'll follow that lead that he has led. I'll follow that breadcrumb. And the problem for the Department of Justice, and the good news for everyone standing up for the rule of law against this administration, whether it's in these cases or others, is that once you start to get a number of judges saying it in these cases, then you'll start to get judges in other kinds of cases saying, well, look, there are 6, 7 judges, 8, 10 judges who are saying presumption of regularity has been destroyed in this area. Like, maybe we'll now apply that to my area. And before you know it, one thing leads to another and momentum builds. And that's the reason why I think the Department of Justice is going to be freaked out beyond words about this judge's decision. And I expect we will see appeals. I think we'll see the kinds of inappropriate and sharp statements that this Department of Justice makes. I think that there is a total freak out going on right now in the halls of Washington, D.C. by what has been unleashed by Pam Bondi's letter to the governor of Minnesota. You were angered by it. I was angered by it. It caused outrage through the political halls and through ordinary citizens. And now here it is, a federal judge picking it up and taking that outrage, putting it in a legal wrapper in a particular case. But let's see if that spreads like wildfire, because that could be one of the biggest blows to this Department of Justice as it moves forward over the next 3 years.
Well, so Mark, my question here is going to be, it's your firm that's litigating these cases, again, in 24 different jurisdictions. And so you have agency here. Are you going to be able to go to other judges and say, look what this judge in Oregon just said? And so if that judge wasn't willing to confer the presumption of regularity onto the Trump administration, you shouldn't either. And so I want to know if you're going to be doing that in some of these other cases where that litigation is happening. But first, a quick note for everybody watching. Mark and his team are the front lines of this stuff. They are what's standing between the federal government, the Trump administration, gaining access to your private voter data, including social security numbers. It is just them standing between Trump getting that info and that info staying at the state level where it belongs. So a small step that we can all take to support the invaluable work that Mark and his team are doing in the courts is to subscribe to Democracy Docket. That's the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting elections. I use it on a daily basis. I use it to prep for this video right here. So again, if you're not yet subscribed, I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Please go ahead and subscribe.
Yeah, you can absolutely count on it that every one of these judges in these other cases is going to know about this opinion. And if Pam Bondi has any questions, she could subscribe to Democracy Docket and she could read all those filings, because one of the things Democracy Docket does is it post-court filings. So yeah, the judges in these other cases are going to be made aware of it by us, or in some instances by the states that are also involved in some of this litigation. But you can be sure we're going to make sure that every judge knows in these cases. And I would encourage lawyers, like I said, in other areas where this presumption is posing such a big challenge. You know, Brian, I go all the way back to a video that you and I did a while ago, and I hope that people maybe take a chance to go back and watch it. And it involved the presumption of regularity, and it involved some of the earliest deployments in Los Angeles of the National Guard. And as you recall, you know, Gavin Newsom sued and said there is no emergency here. Like there is no insurrection, there is no emergency, there's nothing out of control. And he wound up losing some of the early skirmishes in that case because the judges were saying, well, we're kind of bound by whatever the administration says the facts are. And, you know, and that's an example of the presumption of regularity, you know, taking the legal, all of these fancy legal words aside. It means that, you know, if Donald Trump tomorrow, which he has not yet, but if tomorrow he invokes the Insurrection Act, he's going to say, his Department of Justice will say, well, if Donald Trump says there's an insurrection, you know, you, Your Honor, have to sort of defer to that. You have to assume that the federal government knows more than you do about whether there's an insurrection in some Home Depot parking lot someplace. And once that starts to break down, once the government no longer gets the benefit of the doubt, as you and I argued, like I said, going back all the way to the Los Angeles situation, the judges should have been looking behind that then. Like they should not have been giving this presumption of regularity. I think this doctrine has to be scrapped in its entirety, to be honest with you. It shouldn't just be one-off cases. This time in history, it is too dangerous to give Donald Trump's Department of Justice or any of his agency lawyers a presumption of good faith and that they somehow are speaking on behalf of the American people in a dispassionate and neutral way. But that Los Angeles thing is a good example of how much damage this kind of doctrine did in the past and why I welcome what's happening now with this Oregon judge.
Mark, for posterity here, and I had alluded to the fact that, you know, your law firm is litigating these cases. You are what's standing between, you know, private voter data, including social security numbers, getting to the federal government and staying at the state level. Why is this important? Can you offer up some indication for people who don't really understand that they just hear, okay, the federal government's trying to get the voter rolls. Like, I don't really know what that means. It's opaque, purposefully so. Why is it so significant that this information stay at the state level and not be exposed to the Trump administration?
Yeah, if you have any doubt if the Trump administration agrees with me that this is the most important fight right now for free and fair elections, consider the fact that they have brought, as Brian said, 24 cases in states all around the country. That's the dedication of a lot of resources. And also consider the fact that when Alex Preddy was killed, one of only 3 demands that were made of the governor of Minnesota for the Department of Justice to restore the rule of law was the turning over of these voter files. So the reason why this is so important is because if the Department of Justice wants to engage in mass voter suppression, if they want to kick people off the rolls at scale, I don't mean a person here, a person there. I don't mean 6 people who they say died or, you know, were erroneously registered. I mean at scale, like hundreds of thousands at a time. If they want to do that, they need the voter rolls. Why? Because they don't know who the people are to kick off the rolls, right? Like you can't disenfranchise people unless you know who they are by name, by address, by date of birth, by social security number or partial social security number, by party registration, right? All of this information at a very granular individual level, they need to be able to accomplish the kinds of things that they have pretty much said out loud that they're going to try to accomplish, right? Donald Trump saying, I want to take over elections. He's not taking it over to make sure that the lines are shorter. Steve Bannon saying, let's have ICE surround the polls. They're not surrounding the polls to make sure the snow's cleared, right? This is all being done with a purpose in mind, and this is going to be, like I said, perhaps the biggest legal fight of a year in which we're going to have a lot of big legal fights.
And again, that underscores the importance of the work that you and your team are doing right now, standing in between the Trump administration, getting what they want from these voter rolls at the state level. So a small step, again, we can all take is to subscribe to Democracy Docket. I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. And of course, if you want to see more episodes of Democracy Watch, that link's on the screen as well. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch. I'm joined now by national voting rights correspondent at Mother Jones and the author of the book Minority Rule, Ari Berman. Ari, thanks for joining me again.
Hey, Brian, great to talk to you again. Thank you.
So, Ari, you are one of the premier reporters in the country when it comes to voting rights. You do excellent work. As we see all of these threats continue to bear down at the hands of Trump, whether it's sending the FBI to an election office in Fulton County to grab all of the 2020 ballots, whether it's Pam Bondi sending a letter to Minnesota at the peak of the violence at the hands of ICE and saying we can pull back, but it's going to cost you your voting rolls. As all of this is happening, what do you think is the most pronounced threat that we're contending with, and what do you think the impact is going to be on 2026?
I think all of these tactics by the Trump administration have a common theme, which is using the full force of the federal government, whether it's the FBI, DOJ, ICE, to try to interfere in the 2026 election. And it's funny to me, Brian, this is thought of as a hypothetical. I keep seeing all these stories. Will Trump interfere in the 2026 election? And I would argue he's already interfering in the 2026 election. When you have ICE terrorizing blue states and blue cities, when you have the FBI raiding and getting 700 boxes of ballots in a key swing county, when you have the DOJ demanding people's personal information to get masked agents out of a place. I mean, I think this is already something that could lead people to choose not to vote for fear that they will be harassed at the polls, or their information will be turned over to the federal government, or their secret ballot will no longer be secret. And so this is all part of a concerted strategy by Trump to interfere in the midterms. And that's how we should think about it, not as one thing here or one thing here, but as it all being connected.
What do you think needs to be done on the state level or the federal level? Although, presumably there's not much that can be done because Trump is in charge. But what needs to be done to kind of erect barriers to what's being attempted by Trump right now?
Democrats in the places they have power, particularly at the state and local level, need to do everything they can to try to Trump-proof the system. So we don't see more things like the ballots being taken out of Fulton County. We don't see more things like Trump issuing an executive order to seize voting machines and people being caught off guard. People need to think through the kind of things Trump might do. And this is not to be alarmist. It's not to be a doomer, but Trump takes things to the very edge. Right. We saw him do it in 2020. And so people need to be prepared, for example, for him to invoke the Insurrection Act, to claim a national emergency, to say that voting is so crooked, we have to take the machines and the ballots and other things like that. He can't unilaterally do it on his own, but I think we need to be prepared for Trump to push the system as far as it'll go if he feels like he's losing power. And every day it looks more likely like he will lose power, at least his party will lose power, and that's going to make the administration become more and more extreme.
Do you have concerns, even as we head toward midterms right now, that we may not have a free and fair election?
I have concerns about how free and fair it will be. I know a lot of people just think that Trump's going to cancel the midterms altogether.
Right. And I don't think
I don't have that fear.
Yeah.
I don't have that fear. The president can't unilaterally do this, but the actions he's taking are very intimidating to people. And when he does things like take 700 boxes of ballots, to me, that's as much forward-looking as it is backwards-looking. They want these ballots in Georgia so they can say, finally, we found the evidence of fraud, however flimsy that argument will be. Therefore, that's a predicate for us being more aggressive in terms of our actions. Whether, as I said, it's trying to seize ballots in future elections or take voting machines or deploy ICE or the National Guard or something else at the polls, things that we haven't seen in any previous elections. These are the kind of things that Trump is now contemplating for 2026.
I have a theory with regard to Tulsi Gabbard, because obviously she was, she caught a lot of attention because she was at the execution of that FBI search warrant in Fulton County, Georgia, and she shouldn't be there in theory. Well, nobody should be there in theory because that shouldn't have happened, but she in particular shouldn't have been there because her job as Director of National Intelligence is to make sure that there wouldn't be foreign interference in the election. And so I have a theory as to why she might have been there, and we've seen Trump repost, crazy Truth Social conspiracy theories about how the Italians and the Swiss and the Chinese are all, part of some grand conspiracy with Joe Biden's CIA and FBI to meddle in our elections. And so we've seen that kind of stuff get propped up by Trump's movement. Do you think that Tulsi Gabbard is there to try and kind of legitimize some crazy conspiracy theory like this so that he then has some justification? To be able to say, look, Tulsi Gabbard just told me that Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelans and the Chinese and the Italians and the Swiss all conspired with Joe Biden to rig our elections. And so now we have no choice but to allow me full oversight, full nationalized oversight of our elections so that I can make sure that this miscarriage of justice doesn't happen again. And then, obviously do whatever he's trying to do, which would ultimately benefit him and his party in the end. Do you think that there's some legitimacy to that theory?
Yes, I think that's very plausible because, as you said, the Director of National Intelligence is prohibited by law from taking part in domestic law enforcement operations, and her only portfolio with regards to elections is stopping foreign interference in elections. Now, we'll leave aside the fact that the Trump administration has completely gutted protections against foreign or domestic interference in elections. But after the raid in Fulton County, there was a very revealing Reuters story that said that Gabbard's people had been in Puerto Rico looking for evidence that Venezuela interfered in Puerto Rican elections. Suddenly they're interested in what happens in Puerto Rico, I guess. But the point is that was a
that could have been a great moment for the whole country to come together yesterday at the Super Bowl. When we have finally the administration sees Puerto Rico for something that's important. But
finally we see why the administration cares about Puerto Rico.
Right.
Well, they didn't find any evidence, of course, of Venezuelan interference in the election, but that was a tell that Gabbard is preparing some kind of report for Trump about interference in the 2020 election. I think it's very plausible they're going to have concoct some wild theory about Venezuela interfering in the election. You've already seen people like Mike Flynn, Mike Lindell talk about this. It's in far-right election denial circles. They could lean on Maduro himself to admit that he colluded in the 2020 election as a result of a plea deal. I mean, these things sound crazy, but once she's there, trying to access the ballots, look at the FBI raid, it raises a lot of unsettling questions about where this is all heading. And I absolutely think that Trump is going to seize on any kind of accusations to try to interfere in the midterms. And that's why the presence of Gabbard and the raid in Fulton County was so disturbing, because it's clearly a predicate for more extreme action by the administration.
And the reality is he has these people lined up. I mean, we know Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader in Venezuela, is, wrapped around Trump's finger to the point where she even gifted him her Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously, Maduro's regime, his vice president, who's currently in power, is only there expressly because she's willing to participate in any way that Trump wants her to participate, whether that means gifting American oil companies oil or, laundering whatever bullshit, conspiracy theory gives him some justification to engage in some election interference moving forward. He's collected all of these different people around the world who need something from him, need something from the United States, and so will be perfectly willing to do what Trump already tried to do once, which is to use Zelensky, for example, to serve as a way to launder some dirt on Joe Biden. This isn't even theoretical. theoretical, to your point. Like we've seen this happen. Trump got impeached over this exact thing, where he's perfectly willing to use foreign leaders to give some information that he can use to weaponize against his political opponents and benefit himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we know from Trump is that he's 100% transactional, and he'll use whatever kind of leverage we have. And that's true on the foreign front, and it's also true on the domestic front. And what really makes me nervous is that all the people that might have stood up to Trump in 2020 have been replaced. I mean, you can't imagine anyone in the White House today standing up to Trump and saying, don't seize the voting machines, don't invoke the Insurrection Act. All of the crazy things he wanted to do, he was somehow talked off the ledge, not by a bunch of moderates, but by people like Attorney General Barr, right? Or Mark Milley, or whoever it may be. And Pam Bondi's not going to stand up to Trump. Tulsi Gabbard's not going to stand up to Trump. Pete Hegseth isn't going to stand up to Trump. They were put in there specifically because they wouldn't stand up to Trump. And that's why I think the possibility of Trump interfering in the midterms in a more dramatic way than he tried to do in 2020 is very much on the table, because there's no one to restrain him right now. And he knows that sooner or later he's going to have to leave. And so the last thing he wants is to spend his last 2 years in office being investigated over and over by a Democratic Senate or a Democratic House.
You know, Ari, we have heard Steve Bannon, for example, come out and say, damn right, ICE is going to be at the polls. And my concern with these troop deployments across the country is not just that, you know, that they are dangerous and unconstitutional, but also that Americans become normalized to this idea of, you know, boots on the ground. And we know that if Trump had boots on the ground in 2020, for example, when he wanted to seize the voting machines and he had moderating forces like Bill Barr, which is a crazy thing to say, but, you know, Bill Barr wasn't going to participate in this whole, you know, bogus conspiracy theory about there being fraud in the election. He himself called it bullshit. But, you know, Trump has replaced Bill Barr with Pam Bondi, and now he has boots on the ground all over the country with these ICE agents who are a lawless rogue police force that's answerable to him, and they act with impunity. And so do you have any reaction here to what we've heard from Steve Bannon in terms of, you know, using these ICE agents who, again, answerable to Trump, don't feel like the law applies to them, are ill-trained, ill-equipped to deal with, you know, any domestic disputes, that those people are going to be the ones that Trump decides to deploy to the polls?
Yeah, and my concern is that ICE doesn't even need to be at the polls for it to have a suppressive effect. If ICE is doing operations in blue states and blue cities, basically making them occupied territory in the run-up to the election, that's going to scare some people away from turning out. And so having them at the polls would be a dramatic escalation, and one that I think would be very questionable legally in terms of their ability to be there. But even just having them around now, but certainly in the run up to the election, is something that's very concerning. And I believe that that's something that Democrats should add to their list of demands in terms of agreeing to any kind of DHS funding deal. They should say, make clear that ICE has no role with regards to elections, but also we can't have ICE operations in the run-up to elections. There's things on the books, for example, like in the National Voter Registration Act, you can't remove people from the rolls 90 days before the election. They should have the same kind of thing with ICE to say that we don't want any ICE activity in the run-up to the election, because we've already seen how Trump's going to deploy this. He's going to specifically deploy it in Democratic areas and in swing districts to try to suppress people from voting. And it's going to be really hard to quantify how many people don't show up because they don't want to deal with that level of harassment.
Last question here, Ari. What does success look like for this midterm cycle, and what does a lack of success look like in this midterm cycle? What are you looking at to determine whether we've had free and fair elections?
I mean, success looks like people being willing to come out and vote, a process by which they can vote, and a process by which their votes count. Now, that's how things have been throughout our history, but I mean, there's a real question about whether that's going to happen this amount of time. And I think it's very, very clear that there needs to be an extremely high level of turnout and mobilization to make those kind of things happen. That if it is a very tight election, or it comes down to one state or one district or something like that, it's going to be a lot easier for Trump to interfere than if it's an overwhelming victory. The way it wouldn't look like a free and fair election is people are afraid of turning out in the first place. There's all sorts of barriers put before them to cast a ballot. And then ultimately, once they cast a ballot, those results are challenged if Democrats win. And either the result is somehow overturned, or we see a replay of 2020 where the results hold, but an extreme amount of stress is put on the system. And honestly, I don't think the American system, given where we're at, can handle another 2020 right now.
Ari, where can folks who are watching and listening see and hear more from you?
They can read me at motherjones.com. They can buy my books, Minority Rule, and Give Us the Ballot wherever books are sold. And they can find me on Blue Sky at Ari Berman.
Well, I would highly recommend all three of those things. I do all three of those things. I've been following Ari for the entirety of my own career in digital political media, and I could not recommend highly enough. Ari, you do amazing work. Thanks for all the work you're doing, and I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thanks so much, Brian. Always great to talk to you. Keep up the good work as well.
So long. So thanks again for taking the time.
Super happy to be back with you. I can't wait till next time. Take care of yourself.
I'm joined now by the Democratic nominee for governor of Texas, Gina Hinojosa. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's great to be with you, Brian.
So as it relates to Texas, we just saw a few weeks back during the primary that a bunch of the districts that Texas Republicans had redrawn to kind of engineer themselves a majority in the House to win these 5 seats, that in 4 of those new congressional districts, Democrats actually turned out more than Republicans. And so what kind of a blinking red light do you think that is for the Republican Party as we head toward this midterm election?
This 2026 midterm is going to be unlike anything we've seen. We are seeing Democrats making gains in Texas like we haven't seen in decades. Something is happening in Texas. And so, yes, they way underestimated our energy and our excitement. They way underestimated where the Latino vote is in Texas for this midterm election. So this creates in Texas at an opportune time a real opportunity for Democrats to make gains in a big, big way this midterm election.
So talk to me about the Latino population in particular, because I think the way that Republicans had looked at that demographic group was, okay, they are a permanent part of our coalition now. And so we can gerrymander these maps, assuming that the Latino voters who swung for Trump and Republicans in 2024 are always going to be Trump and Republican voters moving forward. But is that the case?
No, they're not. So I'm originally from the Rio Grande Valley. Trump won the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. We launched our campaign from the Rio Grande Valley, and people are angry with status quo. They're angry at the Trump administration and the Republican leadership that has enabled it. And so Latinos swung in a big way. Let me give you let me put into context what that means for Democrats in this midterm election. In 2018, Beto got 64% of the Latino vote. Okay. He came really close to flipping Texas. In 2026, when I get 64% of the Latino vote against Abbott, I win because there's more Latinos in the voting pool. Taylor Ramett, who just flipped an open Senate seat in Tarrant County, the largest Republican county in the whole state, in the whole country, he got 79% of the Latino vote, right? It is pretty incredible the way Latinos have swung in a big way. Really, these immigration attacks on our families, on our communities are personal. Many of us are from mixed status families. My own mother was not born in this country. My grandmother never became a citizen. So these attacks are literally hitting home for so many Latinos in Texas. We are a very patriotic people, and we take pride in who we are. And so to have it be questioned and challenged by this government is unacceptable, and it's made Latinos very angry.
So help me understand a little bit here, because I think the way that we used to think about Latinos, decades ago was, okay, any issues related to the Latino community is like has to focus on immigration, and then everybody else talks about the economy. And then it became clear that Latinos vote very much along the same lines as everybody else in this country, which is to say that the economy, if the economy is the principal issue for most Americans, it's also going to be the principal issue for Latinos. And so when we hear that,
Hey, mods. Yo, we just had like 500 people in here. Y'all start just putting people out, it drops the viewership. The way I deal with them on here is facts. I'm not putting everybody out. We need the people in here that's talking stupid. That's content. We need those motherfuckers in here. So, unless they being like vulgar, like my skin is thick. I don't give a fuck what they saying, bro. Y'all don't have to put them out. Let them say that bullshit. That's how we get the content and subject matter. All right? Hit their ass with facts. Let's debate.
this issue of ICE in particular is moving them. Does that mean it's swung back to immigration issues? Does that mean both are important? Like, just give me a little bit of help me understand a little bit here, because I think the way that we had been kind of trained recently to think about the Latino population is whatever issue is impacting the rest of America is also very much the same issue that's impacting that community.
Right. So that's a great question. So last election cycle, I will say that border security was an issue, a liability for Democrats. Biden was not seen as strong on border security. Remember at the time there were the caravans coming, people were sleeping under bridges. It felt chaotic. And so I think Democrats were punished because of it. But this issue there's been a 180 on this issue for reasons that I told you, because people feel personally attacked. It's people who have been in this country for 20 years, right. Law-abiding, hardworking members of our community are now being targeted, and then some, right? They're even targeting citizens, as we know. And so on that issue, it is now a liability for Republicans. It is a winning issue for Democrats, but you're right that the economic issues are always at the forefront for this community. And in 2026, tell me who is doing better economically. Yeah. I mean, everybody is struggling. And in Texas, it's worse because our income is growing at a slower pace than the national average. There was just a study on this released last month. Despite the fact that we are a world economic powerhouse in Texas, and people know we built that economic power, right? So people are very angry about the cost of everything going up. We have the most working people who are uninsured in this state, most children who are uninsured. Home ownership is out of reach. The price of electricity has skyrocketed since Winter Storm Uri, when Greg Abbott sold us out to industry instead of looking out for the people of Texas. Remember, we lost power. Over 700 Texans died. Like on and on and on. Texans are struggling with the basics with a Republican governor in Greg Abbott, who just doesn't deliver for us. He only delivers for his billionaire donors.
So you had mentioned border security and how that was a liability for Democrats in 2024. And I understand that that's not the principal issue anymore because, obviously the issue of ICE has kind of superseded that. But that doesn't mean that Democrats are still viewed favorably when it comes to border security.
I'm glad you said that. We about to go to Fox News.
And that's still going to be a thing in Texas. So where do you stand on the issue of border security so that folks know whether it will continue to be a liability, continue to be a weakness for Democrats, or whether it's something that you are going to focus on?
My position on border security is informed by what I heard from people, that absolutely we should have border security, but targeting longtime hardworking members of our communities who have been here 20 years is not making us more secure. It's making us less safe. And so we can't be treating those populations the same. People who just arrive at the border absolutely need to be vetted. in a different way than people who have been here for a long time. There should be a path to legalization. I have learned from the Harris County District Attorney in Houston that, in fact, he has child sex abuse cases.
This is actually a really smart upgrade for your laptop setup. It is a laptop stand and an 11-in-1 docking station in one.
Well, it's almost August, closing in on November. Let's talk about how the midterm elections are shaping up right now. Fox News chief political analyst Britt Hume joins us again this evening.
Come on in, MAGA.
Britt. You look at our polls and you look at the condition of the economy, and this is the one for midterms we look at closely, and that is excellent or good, 24%, only fair or poor, 76%. And that has got to have Republicans, Senate and House, concerned.
Oh, absolutely, Brett. And the truth is there's not much good news for Republicans in this whole poll we did. You know, underwater on the economy, as you showed, underwater on affordability. Those two issues are front and center for sure. Republicans have a little bit of a lead on national security and, I guess, law enforcement. But everywhere you look, Republicans are down. Now, there is a bit of good news. As you mentioned, the redistricting will help them with seats in the House, and they will probably need every one of them they can get from that. And the other thing is, of course, that on the question of intensity of voters' sentiment, it appears that Republicans are down, but if you add the people who are very likely to those who are extremely likely to vote, the difference for Democrats is very slight. So Republicans can take some faith and some hope for that. But, you know, with an unpopular incumbent in this particular presidency in its first midterm, the weight of history is pretty strong, and the party in power in the White House has historically, with very few exceptions, done very poorly in the midterm like this one.
Well, let's look at the motivation poll you mentioned, motivated to vote in the midterm elections. Extremely, very, and not at all. And Democrats have a lead, but again, to your point, if you add up extremely and very, and you have pretty much...
People commenting in the chat is how YouTube distributes new viewers. So as long as people type it in the chat, it's a good thing. Like, motherfuckers say some crazy shit, like out of line, then now we gotta, you gotta get up out here. But you can hide them from the channel. They don't even fucking know that they blocked, but they still watching. You put them in timeout, they're gonna go to another live stream.
A tie with Republicans hanging in there. How much do you think that the Democratic Socialist push around the country in some of these primaries and some of these elections that we've seen affects some of that motivation for Republicans?
Well, I certainly think that's part of one of the ingredients in the general unpopularity of the Democratic Party, which is, I should say, is one of the reasons Republicans have some hope here. The Democrats are really in bad odor with the public, and they got all these extreme candidates out there, and some of whom have won nominations. One of whom got elected mayor of New York City, and is a very visible presence. So that's something that Republicans are sure to hit on. That the Democratic Party has gone so far left, it's off the side of the table, and they'll do with it what they can. But it's tough in a midterm when people are feeling strongly, as we've discussed, about the economy and the cost of living, to buck that. And I think Republicans have a tall order ahead of them.
Yeah, and independence upside down on the war in Iran, and obviously gas prices. But
I don't need your sub. I just got 1,000 subs in 14 days. You think I need your sub? I don't. But I know your viewership gonna be back because y'all addicted to this shit over here.
Our point there, favorable opinion of Democratic Socialist agenda, socialism. It's hard to believe that we asked this question, but do you have a favorable opinion of socialism? 52% of Democrats do. 11% of Republicans do. I don't know where the 11% is from, but capitalism wins out on the Republican side. It's just interesting to see these numbers and how that potentially affects things. Mark Thiessen yesterday was saying that perhaps he is starting to feel, just like the red wave prediction in 2022, that the blue wave is not going to be as big as perhaps they think it is.
Well, you know, Brett, we may have entered into an era in which these landslides that we used to see, where, you know, one party or candidate would win up 58, 59% of the vote, win huge presidential election margins and so forth. We haven't had that in quite some time. We may not see it again for some time. And that refusal of the general electorate to really give too much power to either party. I mean, Republicans hold all three branches of the federal government right now, at least the two main ones, Congress and the White House, but they don't hold it by much. President Trump likes to say he was elected in a landslide. Electoral college landslides are not the same as popular vote landslides, and he didn't have a popular vote landslide. He had a narrow but convincing win, and these margins in the House and Senate are very narrow for the Republicans. So everything seems, you know, kind of poised on a knife's edge as we go into this election and into 2028.
As we always say, polls are a snapshot in time, and we have a lot to go before November. Britt, as always, thank you.
We do.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Great to have you here in New York.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Some are saying that she appears to be a sympathizer with some of those radical policy calls, eliminating the Senate, defunding the Department of War, ending all deportations. How do you see it?
Yeah, look, I think that there are so many issues where about 2/3 of Americans are in agreement with each other and in disagreement with the president. And my focus is on those things, right? 2/3 of Americans disagree with the Trump tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. 2/3 of this country believe that wages ought to be higher. Even most Republicans think we ought to raise the minimum wage more than we have. Most Americans believe that we ought to have health care for everybody. There's a version of it I've proposed. There's obviously lots of different versions of how to do that. But that's something most people agree with each other on. Most people are against President Trump's health care cuts, many of which will go into effect next year, I think kind of cleverly timed to come just after the election. So that to me is where the center of gravity of the country meets the center of gravity in my party. And that's what my focus is on when I'm traveling around the country. I go to a lot of places, including more conservative places. We were in Nebraska recently. I was in Arkansas campaigning. And those are the things people most want to know about. How is my life going to be different depending who's in charge?
So you just pitched to them healthcare because that does top the list for a lot of people. They're concerned about the affordability issue when it comes to healthcare. Right. I'm surprised even to see that topping gas, food prices, housing prices even. It sounds like you're pitching Medicare for all. So what do you see?
Well, you remember we had a whole debate over this back when I was running for president. I favored something we called Medicare for all who want it. The idea is that there is that publicly available plan, but we're not going to force anybody onto it. I still think that's the right answer. And it's interesting, some of the critics of that plan before have come to embrace it now. I think it would be a good policy. But yeah, the cost of healthcare.
Breaking news, Todd Blanche just worked a deal with the Republican senators to be confirmed on Tuesday. He basically agreed not to scrap the $1.8 billion for those traders. In return, that he gets support to be the AG. Now, if you've watched my videos, because I always give context, not news, here's the deal. I want him to be AG. I want that smoke, because that's going to put him and Trump just that much closer to jail. In other words, what he's going to do is let open the gates of hell of all Trumpism, and everybody and their mama's watching. That's why Trump has been firing all of these intelligence officers for the last 20 months, because he just don't want people knowing. But of course, they know. And now you got the BBC opening up his irrevocable trust because he basically sued the BBC. And then you have this whole situation with the Murdochs he's suing. That's not going to go well. He's basically calling in a whole bunch of shit. Then he tried suing Capital One and Chase. And Chase has already kicked his ass. Capital One is about to kick his ass. It's about to, it's an ongoing thing. What we're watching here is a guy who clearly wants to smoke because he's on his end game. Now, he didn't die like I said he would this weekend, because I predicted 137 days ago that this man by his health would go, because I understand with somebody who struggles with their health. And all the doctors on social media were saying he's going to go. Not me, but the doctors on social media. But now he has this open door Blanche is very likely to be confirmed now that he's, cleared this hurdle. And unless somebody comes out of nowhere, Blanche is going to be our AG. What does that mean? That means, again, gates of hell, Trump's coming in, and it's going to be a fight like a motherfucker. Now, you got some things to think about. Do you want to be mad at Blanche? Or do you want to sit here and watch him basically do his own self-in? That's the way I got to say it. I got to be careful how I say it on YouTube. Do his own self-in, because he's walked into it. He's walked into the fire. And the reality is, as much as we talk about Blanche and all of his craziness, and all his wildness, and all the nutso things that he's doing, I can tell you right now, he's going to jail. Pam Bondi's going to jail. And Trump could be going to jail if he doesn't die first. I mean, but again, I don't want him to die. I want him to bleed out. Put that in the comments. Bleed out. Understand that we're in this rough situation where he is going to show his ass. Them confirming this man is an insult to the survivors of Epstein. Them confirming this man is an insult to the 1,200 employees who signed a letter for the first time in U.S. history saying do not do that. Him confirming this man is an insult to previous presidents as well as previous staff who have said, do not do this. This is a big mistake. He's going to walk into this. He's going to show his ass. He's going to let Trump do whatever he wants to do. And they're all going to get in trouble. You know why? Because as far as Trump's concerned, he didn't win. He's not winning now. He's on the list, and the list is coming out. And if he lives so long, he's going to jail, and he's going to have company. Remember this always.
Unlock your 3.35% APY with Robinhood Gold. Start earning with gold today.
Well, let's see. And the reason they asked is I think there's a deal. There's a deal on Hormuz, and then there will be a deal on the nuclear, or you might call it the denuclearization.
Stop lying.
Now what we're doing is we're talking to them in the form of a negotiation. It begins tomorrow afternoon, and we'll see if it's true. I'd love to do that. Save a lot of lives. Save a lot of unnecessary power.
Ed Luce, Trump went on to say that had the attack gone ahead, it would have been the biggest since World War II. Let's do a little fact checking here. I think we can agree that Iran's neighbors in the region don't want a return to full-out war. That part probably right. And we know that the MBS did make that call with Trump over the weekend. But the rest of it, how can we believe anything he's saying? We've been down this road so many times before where he threatens a big attack and then walks away from it. Iran calls his bluff. Trump claims negotiations are coming. And then Tehran the next day is like, no, we're not even talking to them. Now there's some mediators, in the region who are trying to get some negotiations going again. Of course, inherently that would be a good thing. But it seems to me this is yet another example of Trump having lost his leverage and he's really stuck with no clear way out.
He is. I mean, it's really interesting that it was a call from Mohammed bin Salman, as you mentioned, Jonathan, on Saturday, that persuaded Trump to back off, because Iran has made it very clear that it is prepared to strike the energy infrastructure and other targets in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in countries that really don't want to see this escalation. And Iran has been broadening the front of the zone of its activities, to as far away as Egypt. There was a drone attack, an attempted drone attack on a US ship in Egypt. So Iran is not backing down at all. They're quite happy with escalation because they believe that ultimately this will deter Trump from pursuing this war. They're not backing down, which makes it all the more odd that Trump thinks that these kinds of threats, that this will be the biggest bombing campaign since World War II, are going to deter Iran. It's not deterrable at this point because its reading of this war is that the higher the cost it imposes on Trump and America's allies in the Gulf and beyond the Gulf and on the world economy, the less likely this war is to be resumed in full by Trump. So this bluster is not working. but he keeps trying to throw spaghetti against the wall. One other point is that, Israel was all locked and loaded and ready to join Trump in this new attack on Iran, and wasn't informed that he'd decided to call it off. There's been a real switch since the beginning of this war. Saudi Arabia is now more influential than Israel, and that's a huge deal.
Absolutely a significant development there in the Middle East. For more, let's now bring in staff writer at The Atlantic covering national security and the Defense Department, our friend Nancy Youssef. Nancy, great to see you. First, let's just start this with what's the latest we know about the situation there in the Middle East? And, is there the possibility of talks in the days ahead, and is there any hope they could yield anything?
I think there's always the possibility of talks. We've heard that Qatar is mediating talks between Iran, Oman, and the United States over the future of the Strait of Hormuz. I think the challenge is what those talks yield. For all the threats and counter threats and climb down from threats, the Iranians are not signaling that they feel that they're in a weaker position. And in fact, they're saying they intend to keep supervising the Strait of Hormuz. And meanwhile, you have the president saying that the Strait must be fully open, freely and fully open. And so even on the basic terms of what these talks are supposed to achieve, there seems to be a very fundamental disagreement. And so that's only on one of the four issues that needs to be negotiated: the Strait of Hormuz, sanctions, the future of Iranian proxies, and of course Iran's nuclear program. And so the supposition up until this point has been that the U.S., Iran, Oman must agree on the future of the Strait of Hormuz before they can tackle those more complex topics. And even now, after a flurry of activity of these threats and counter threats, it doesn't seem that those very fundamental questions about what needs to come out of the Strait of Hormuz part of the talks has been settled.
So, Nancy, you and I have a new piece in The Atlantic we co-wrote titled, "This May Be Trump's Biggest Error in the War." And I'll read a little bit of it now. The Trump administration's greatest mistake in the Iran war may be its persistent failure to understand Tehran's priorities and motivations, and how much punishment the regime is willing to absorb to prevail. The convoluted and complicated war has swung almost weekly between peace overtures and fighting. Part of the confusion may stem from the fact that Trump himself appears to be of at least two minds about how he wants to proceed. He's vacillated between backing more military action and giving peace talks a chance. The U.S. cannot begin to understand its enemy if it has yet to settle on its own aims or how to achieve them. For now, there are no good options for Trump, and there is no clarity as to how two sides in a widening war can find off-ramps, particularly if they continue to misinterpret each other's actions. Both sides seem to agree on one thing: there is no end in sight to the war. And Nancy, I mean, let's just say it, pretty smart stuff there. But let's talk about what could come next. Like we've talked a lot about Trump has no good options. That's true. Okay, so he has bad options. Walk us through a couple of the bad options. Like, what are the ways that he could settle to try to get out of this?
So he could announce that the war is over and that he's won. The Ayatollah is dead. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. If they try to get a nuclear weapon, the United States will go back to war. I'm not sure that the stock markets and others would believe it, but he could declare that and announce that he's leaving. He could also escalate strikes on Iran, and he signaled that he thinks that this is an effective way to do it. And during the Camp David talks, he said that he thinks that they'll reach a point where Iran can't take it anymore. The idea being that you do just enough strikes to sort of tip the balance out of the regime control and lead to its collapse. But of course, the question becomes what happens if that doesn't work, and how does Iran retaliate? And by the way, those retaliations will demand the United States go through its dwindling supply of munitions and interceptors. And so there's a risk associated with that.
I'm lowering my ask to just $1 today. And here's why. This Senate race in Texas is likely going to be the most expensive and the most competitive in the country this November. Flipping this Senate.
It looked like Telefrico was winning in Texas. He's definitely ahead, and it looked like he's going to win.
Seat and taking back the Senate majority will require an unprecedented.
Or he could go back to the negotiation table, as he's signaled that he's been willing to do. But because the Iranians are not backing down, they are not acting like a nation that has come under attack, but one that thinks that it has the upper hand. To go back to those negotiations, the United States would have to make some concessions that has so far been unwilling to make on things like the Strait of Hormuz. It might be that there's a negotiation that's reached that the Iranians have more control of the strait than the president had wanted at the start of this war. And so that's why there aren't great options, because there are munition shortages that limit the U.S. capability militarily. The threats of strikes has cost the United States credibility at the negotiation table. And the president has in the past declared that he's won before, only to then go back to war. And we should note that this is all against the backdrop of midterm elections coming up in less than 100 days and growing unpopularity with this war. Can the president afford to restart fighting that could lead to a rise of oil and gas prices so close to a midterm election when that issue has become a key one for voters as we approach this election season?
Yeah, the midterms are approaching and gas prices rising, really noticeable this weekend. This is every time this could get worse for Trump. To this point, it has. And David French, your latest opinion piece for the New York Times is titled "The War That Could Swallow the World." And in it, you write in part this: the only thing worse than President Trump starting an unconstitutional war is Trump losing control of that war. I've often wondered what it was like to be alive in the summer of 1914, much less 1938 and 1939. When did people start to realize that the world was on the brink of catastrophe? Speak up too soon or too frequently, and you look ridiculous, like the Chicken Little of World War. Speak up too late, and you live, if you live, with bitter regret. I do not think that world war is inevitable, nor do I think it's probable. But it is now more possible than it has been at any other time since the end of the Cold War. And the American government is led by the worst rulers in the modern history of the United States. Our future may depend in part on American voters deciding to give Congress a spinal transplant. But that requires us to do something that democracies have rarely, if ever, done successfully. See the catastrophe coming and act decisively before a terrible war swallows the world. David French, obviously an ominous warning there. We have seen signs in the recent week or two that this war could expand. Other countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, more getting involved. Tell us more as to why you think that might just be the beginning, and that could expand much further and in a much more disastrous fashion.
Well, consider this. When I said at the very beginning, Trump has lost control of this war, I don't think that when he walked into it, he expected it would be spreading across the region the way that it has. He's said as much. I don't think that this is what he wants, to have the Houthis have entered the conflict, to begin to try to control the Red Sea. Already in the region, it's expanded beyond Trump's control and beyond Trump's reach. And then you have these other really ominous developments. You've had a Ukrainian strike on an Iranian boat that Ukraine claims was transporting weapons and other related war material between Iran and Russia. You've had information and evidence that Russia is helping Iran target U.S. bases, making Iranian strikes more comprehensive. At the same time, Russia continues to be undeterred, even though it's taking massive battlefield losses. You recently had a Russian missile landing in a Polish field, which there have been drones that have crossed into Poland. First missile from Russia that we know of that's crossed into Polish airspace, impacting in Poland. And just again and again and again, you're seeing China supply missiles to Iran reportedly. This war is not in his control. And right now, every combatant in every one of the major world conflicts is escalating. And so this is a situation. I wanted people to begin to try to move their eyes just from focusing in on the in and outs of each ceasefire or false ceasefire or each deal or each fake deal, and instead take a bigger, broader view. These two conflicts, to some degree, are merging and they're expanding. And this is extraordinarily dangerous. And which of our world leaders is serious about trying to reach a resolution? I don't see anyone quite yet.
Smash that like button, y'all. Double tap that screen. I'm gonna let this run for a little while longer. But man, we got 400. Let them
Day in the
motherfuckers
life
say
of a
whatever
small
they
PT
want.
studio owner.
I don't
Top
give
of
a
my to-do list is check the candidates from our premium sponsored job post.
That shit kind of took us out.
All hell is breaking loose as President Zelensky of Ukraine is hitting Russia hard. This as Donald Trump is refusing to give Zelensky the interceptor licenses he so desperately needs in order to stop Russia's ballistic missile strikes. Now, Zelensky going on the offense, using that right now as the best defense, because right now Kyiv is struggling to defend itself from Russia's ballistic missiles. Let me show you what went down. This is the moment that a Ukrainian drone attacked the latest Wild Berries facility to be hit. This one is in the hub in Novosmenkino. Let me show you what went down here. Play this clip.
Хорошо попал. Пизда.
Now, let me show you the aftermath of that Wild Berries logistic hub over here. You could see it burning down. Let's play this clip.
Мимо. Ладно. На нахуй. Вот. Ой, блядь. Все, крыша завалилась нахуй. Крыша упала? Да. Все еще. Так он попал или нет, я не понял. А вон слева попал. Да. Вон дым заново пошел. Да. Ебать ту Люсю. Охренеть. Птички летают. Да, птичка похуй. Все, сейчас еще прилетит.
Just take a look at all of the Wild Berries logistical facilities here on this chart that have been hit. It's almost half of them at this point. The Wild Berries logistical facilities, it's like they're Amazon over there in Russia. And Ukraine argues that the wild berries are used in order to build out Russia's military capabilities. Now, let me show you this video we've got coming in as well. It appears that Ukraine has a new variant of the FP5 Flamingo. Just to remind you, FP1, FP2, those are the long-range drones. The FP5 is the ballistics that Ukraine has been able to develop. Take a look right here. It glides right there near treetop level. Let me show you what this looks like. Play this clip. Now, late last night also, multiple Ukrainian attack drones struck Russia's Belgorod State Technological University. This is now being seen all throughout Russia's local channels. It hit a building there, actually, that housed Russian drone development, testing, and operator training. And this center suffered significant damage. Let me just show you the footage. Let's play it.
Там все горит. Прям все. Вон, видишь, даже лестничный пролет видно. Пизда, это, ну, сука, там, где беспилотные аппараты делают и учат, блядь, как ими управлять. Ему пизда, его просто весь взорвали.
Now, a number of fuel storage tanks at the Russian Black Sea port of Taman are ablaze after an overnight Ukrainian strike as well. Ukrainian attack drones hit the Russian-occupied Zuivska power station in the Donetsk Oblast at night, setting it ablaze. Multiple Ukrainian attack drones slammed into Russia's Saratov oil refinery in the morning, setting that facility ablaze. I'll just show you what that looked like to show a short portion of this clip.
Use the promo code to get the Epic Champion at Kempdom for free.
A full cart that's lighter on your wallet. That's a breath of fresh air. Download the Upside app and get a $10 bonus on your first purchase.
Ебать!
More from Russia's Saratov oil refinery ablaze this morning after a successful Ukrainian attack drone raid. Show you the B-roll over there. Ukrainian attack drones also hit Russia's Ufa oil refinery overnight. This is the second strike on that same facility over the weekend. And then a series of explosions ripped through Russia's Nivnekamsk industrial zone in the evening, starting a major fire that you can see there. Here's the message from President Zelensky of Ukraine. Of course, we see every leader and every country reacting to the Russian strikes on Ukraine. We've been covering those here at the Midas Touch Network. Russia's been hitting Kyiv, Zaporizhia, Lviv, Kharkiv, other areas very hard in Ukraine. Ukraine is struggling to defend. It's unable to defend, frankly, against Russia's ballistic missiles. Zelensky and Ukraine are able to strike down Russia's drones, often of the Shahed variant from Iran, and even their cruise missiles. The ballistics, you need the interceptors in order to stop that. And that's exactly what the United States is intentionally depriving Zelensky of, even depriving him of the licenses. Zelensky goes on to say, but the only strong reaction, it is fair, a reaction that really achieves the goal and helps the people of Ukraine, is additional support for us and our people. There are Patriot missiles in the world. It is important that partners make this political decision, a decision to transfer the necessary package. The United States of America, Trump, knows what we need. In Europe, they know what we need. Anti-ballistic missiles should protect people, not lie in warehouses. And every day of the absence of such appropriate assistance is important. It is an opportunity for Russia to kill people. Now, too, we need to react with additional sanctions. Let me show you this over here. The Wild Berries facility hit by Ukrainian drones in Novosmykino. Here, play this clip. Look, if you're in this community, you're paying attention.